Morning after the storm comes thin and clean. The ruts in the lane are full of brown mirrors. The oxen blow steam into the chill and the thatch sags but holds. No bell rings for judgment. No platform is rebuilt. By noon, the village speaks of seed and weather again, of what the rain crushed and what it saved. A rumour moves like a small fish through the shallows. Agnes Cooper is beyond reach. No one says how. Your mother says nothing at all, which is its own answer. Work folds itself back over you. The north field takes the plough. The furrows shine with water before swallowing it. Your father counts days to the fair with the same care. He counts seed. If the lane dries and the sky holds, he says, "You'll gogs, a round of young cheese, and a coil of coarse rope to trade. Perhaps a little barley if the reeve doesn't sniff it out." Your brother tries not to smile and fails. The week turns. The ground firms. On the fair morning you wake by cockcrow to a sky the colour of unbaked bread. Your mother nods up a cloth with your best eggs, tucks the cheese into a wicker basket, and wraps a small packet of mint into the corner of her shawl for sickness on the road. Your father takes the parchment of safe passage. The reeve sold him dear for ink and a seal. And you set off in a small cluster Edwin, the carpenter with a barrow of wooden spoons. Agnes they young, not that Agnes with 2 geese strung by the feet, your family walking light and hopeful. The road to town is a muddle of roots and ruts, smoother where cartwheels have planed the mud. You pass a wayside cross, a leaning shrine with a painted saint inside, his colours mostly weather and guesswork now. Once, 3 riders clatter past, mail glinting, the sound ringing on your ribsand. Everyone steps off into the verge without being told. In the hedges, new leaves show that a special, tender green that feels like it could bruise by mid-morning. You see the town, a ring of ditch and earthen bank with a palisade, a gate where the road narrows between timber. The gatekeeper has a tally stick and a face like a hatchet. He touches the safe conduct, grunts at the seal, and lifts a rope. A boy with a bell shouts something about stall fees and false measures. Inside, sound and smell hit you in a warm wall. Hot iron from the smithy, sour reek from the tanners by the water, yeast from the bakehouse, voices layered on voices, a pipe somewhere trying a tune and losing interest. Houses lean over the lanes as if confiding, their upper stories jutting out on heavy beams. Windows show small squares of horn, clouded and pale. A banner hangs from the Guildhall with a sheaf and sickle stitched in faded thread. The market square opens like a spill of light, the market cross in the middle with steps where children perch until scolded off. Stalls crowd in cloth draped like tame rain in ochres and woad blue baskets, ironwork, pots that promise to hold water where your old one does not, salt in tight white pyramids, a heap of onions the colour of old honey. Your father takes the eggs to a man with a balanced scale and a mouth that counts. Weights go on, eggs go off, and silver ends up in your father's fist pennies, thin from hands, a clipped edge here and there, where some thief shaved a shaving. The cheese goes for a length of new rope and a dozen nails. Your mother swaps dried beans for a pinch of pepper in a twist of paper, just enough to make a pot wake up once a holy day. Edwin argues for a board's worth of spoons and wins a small keg of pitch. He's pleased the way only a man who has outfoxed a measure can be. You try not to stare and still stare at everything. A scribe sits under an awning, quill like a feather, caught in a wind that isn't there, writing letters for people who cannot, names big and proud for a marriage contract, a tidy note for a far cousin. You spell your own name under your breath anyway, the way Father Thomas taught your brother, shapes on an invisible page. A friar preaches by the cross against dice and ale and the sins that grow in lanes, then blesses a baby with a hand gentle. As wool, a troop hauls on masks for a miracle. Plate'll be Noah again, or maybe the saint with the wolf. The dragon is a woven reed mouth and a boy underneath, giggling until cuffed. You watch for a while, then drift toward the stall where a woman sells ribbons that catch the light like water. Your mother lifts one length of blue, the exact blue of woad on washing day. She asks the price. She sets it down, then lifts it again. In the end, your father buys a finger's breadth and no more, and your sister wears the sky in her hair for the rest of the day. Town law looks different and feels different, even if you can't say exactly how. A beadle with a rod checks weights and measures, and a baker gets a fine for a loaf that's light. The crowd hums, not with fear, but with a neat satisfaction. No one unpockets a reeve's fee for inspection at the edge of a puppet stage. Coins travel and return as things, not as threats. When a cart backs into a barrow and spills onions, 3 strangers kneel to catch them like chicks, and no one kicks anyone else. At noon, the great church bell swings. It's a sound with round edges. It folds the market, and for a breath, everything pauses. Your mother slips inside with you, while your father watches the baskets. The church smells of stone, under rain, and old incense. 100 candles flatten the shadows. At a side altar, quiet and low, your mother touches a wick to a flame, and sets her candle among the others. She doesn't say for whom. She doesn't have to. You watch the heat blur the air above it until your eyes sting. Then you go back out to the din and light and the price of onions after the bell. Small things make a day big. Your brother trades a carved toy horse for a used knife-short sound, the kind a boy can keep and be careful with. Your father runs his thumb along the edge and nods. Your sister watches a dyer's hands come away red as berries and laughs when he freckles her with a flick of his fingers. You share a small hot thing called a wafer flour and honey and a hint of the pepper your mother folded into her shawl. Sweet sharp on the tongue, gone before you've decided what it tasted like. Talk moves like weather. A man from the next shire swears the king will call a levy if the Scots stir this summer. A pilgrim jangling with badges says Canterbury's roads are full of miracles and mud in equal measure. A woman in a fine hood mutters that wool prices will do as they please and ruin honest people either way. You take it all in as if it might be useful, because everything might be. The sun leans down the walls by late afternoon. Your father counts what's left in the baskets, not much in purpose. He buys a pot that rings when you thrum it with a fingernail, clean and true. He buys, after a long look at your mother that is both question and thanks, a second iron needle. Small things, heavy with years. You do not stay the night in town. Inns cost, and the curfew bell drives decent people indoors. Better the lane with friends and the last of the light. You leave with your little caravan and your shadows ahead of you. On the way home, the road seems shorter. A skylark sings itself, away into the sky. A fox blinks once from the verge and is gone. By the wayside cross, someone has set a sprig of rosemary into a crack in the wood. Your mother touches it with 2 fingers as you pass. Back in the village, the market day sits on people like a pleasant ache. New pots shine on old hearths. Salt cones glint like little winters on shelves. Somewhere, a child squeals because a ribbon came loose, and then laughs because it's tied back. Your father sets the pot near the fire and pours water into it, just to hear that thin ring again. Your mother unknots the pepper paper and tucks it up out of the reach of small hands. The woad blue ribbon goes on the peg, where everyone can see that the sky can, in fact, be tied. You eat early bread dipped in something that knows pepper nound. Then the day begins to fold. The talk softens. Your brother runs his thumb along the knife again and then wraps it in cloth without needing to be told. Your mother combs your sister's hair and catches the last of the knits with a patience that might be a prayer. Your father turns the new rope in his hands, testing the lay, the way it takes a knot, before sleep. Your mother checks the stone behind the woodpile, the way she might check the latch, as if it's just another thing that keeps a house upright. It hasn't moved. Neither have the herbs hung high, their shadows a small forest along the rafters. Night comes lapping in. The hearth drops from flame to glow. Outside the village is a shape of darker dark, with only the wet smell of earth and the faint far talk of the stream to mark the edges of it. You lie down in your spot, the straw rustling, the wool scratchy, the heat of your sister's shoulder. A good weight against your arm. The town's colors drain into memory, the blue of the ribbon, the red of a dyer's hands, the white flare of a candle flamed, then fade like pictures when the page is turned dot. Tomorrow will be ordinary again. The bridge will still need mending, and the north corner will still wait for the plough. There will be bread to bake on the communal day, and weeds to pull in the bean rows, and a weather eye to keep on clouds that forget their minds. Maybe there will be news that proves nothing and changes less. Maybe there will be none at all. You will rise to the rooster and the ache, and the stove-warm smell of the new pot, and go out into the same field that has held your footprints since you were small, and that will be enough. It has to be. It was. For millions quiet, hard, unrecorded lives that still made the world turn. Sleep now. Let the lane and the market and the bell and the sky fold themselves small and gentle. The village keeps its own watch. Somewhere, if you like, a woman who knows the names of plants is walking. The next morning is baked tithe, kind that reshapes a village's hours. You wake to the damp thunk of kneading from half the doorways and the low, steady talk of women trading yeast and news. Your mother has already lifted last night's dough. From the cool corner where it rose, shaped it quick with hands that know how, and wrapped it in cloth for the walk to the oven. The communal oven squats at the edge of the green, a small hill of clay braced with stone. Smoke threads from its mouth. The oven keeper Raina with a quick laugh has chalked a tally on a plank. Who's next? Whose loaves sit in the hot belly now? Whose crusts mustn't be forgotten? Everyone marks their bread with a cut crosshatch, ring, a simple exo. What comes out finds its way home. Your mother scores 2 lines and a dot. Yours, hers. It's a tiny pride to see that sign. To know your crust by sight. While the oven breathes, there's time for the other constant, the mill. Grain on your back in a sack, you and your father. Take the path that follows the stream. The mill shows itself first in sound, the heavy, patient thrum that gets in your ribs, then in motion, the wheel, lifting water into sheeted light. Inside, it's cool and powder sweet. Walter the miller weighs the grain, takes the Lord's portion with 2 measured scoops and a third that's not measured. If you ask Edwin, and tips the rest into the throat of the stones. The grind starts slow, then steadies, wheat becoming something that looks like winter turned into dust. Your father watches the measure with that careful calm of his, says nothing, and nods at the end. You shoulder the flour. Outside, chaff clings to your sleeves like moths. On the walk back, you pass Father Thomas with a small knot of men carrying poles and a bannerogation days. He tells you, walking the bounds to bless the fields. Children dart in and out of the line, swinging thin willow switches at thistles. The priest's voice is softer than soap and loud, the kind that sits well with wind in barley. From lightning and tempest, good Lord, deliver us. At the cornerstone, where 3 parishes meet, the older boys get a ceremonial tap brisk enough to remember, gentle enough not to bruise, and the priest names the boundary aloud. The words stick in your head the way path turns do. Hedge, oak, ditch, stone. In a year you'll know these by heart, same as the way to the well in the dark. Back at the oven, the mouth glares red, then calms as Raina reaches in with her long peel. Loaves come out, one by one cross, ring, fish, X, set down to crackle as they cool, the sound like rain on dry leaves. Your mother's mark appears. The crust shines where she brushed it with a rag dipped in water. It smells like everything that has ever been right. Day stretches. Sheep bleat from the common, shaggy and due for shearing. Edwin shows you how to oil the blades so they whisper instead of bite. Agnes they young, the one with the geese trades. You a story for a handful of mint. A merchant swore he saw a sea as big as the sky with ships that moved without oars. Her aunt says he drinks. In the lane, a tinker sets a pot on his knee and taps out a dent, listening with his head tipped as if metal speaks, it does. He'll sleep in the church porch and move on at dawn toward noon. A stranger knocks at your doorframe with 2 knuckles and his hat in his hands. He's pilgrim marked. A cloth bag, a staff with more miles than would left in it. A little lead badge pinned to his kappa sword between 2 archers. St. Thomas of Canterbury. He asks for water, nothing more. Your mother gives him a bowl and the heel of yesterday's bread. He blesses you all with fingers that shake and walks on with the obedience of people who no longer choose the road. They are the road. Afternoon lays itself over the village, warm and full. Your father sends you with your brother to the coppice to cut poles while the sap is right. You walk the shade-cool track where the underwood grows in tight, straight shoots. He shows you how to read a stool's age in rings, where to place the cut so it springs again, how to stack the poles so air can walk through them. The woods carry their own smells, wet leaf, crushed garlic, a fox somewhere very sure of itself. On the way home, your brother points out hoof marks that aren't yours. The deer have been in the barley again. He grunts in that older brother way that says we'll mend the gap tonight and you'll hold the stake while I drive it and mind your toes. Evening brings back the flocks, crumples of white and brown that move like cloud shadows across the green, driven by children calling and whistling in a dialect that belongs only to sheep. Your mother sets one of the new loaves near the hearth and smears the crust with garlic and a pinch of pepper until the whole room smells like a feast. A pot of pottage murmurs to itself. Your father mends a strap with small, neat stitches that make a line like writing. There's talk at the doorways as the light drops off the eaves. Someone thought they saw a figure at the forest's lip last night. Shawl, small, quick. Someone else found tracks that weren't deer and weren't men with boots either. Someone says nothing at all. Father Thomas walks past with his hands. Behind his back, face unreadable in the last light. The investigator and his guard rode out at dawn and did not return by dusk. A fact. Facts are safe to say. After supper, the green fills with the easy work that looks like play. 2 boys toss a leather ball between them, and try not to break a thatch. They fail. They fix it fast, with laughter hushed by a glance from a window. Girls chalk a square on packed dirt and skip it until the chalk is gone, and then some. Old Sarabak from questioning, and suddenly everyone's favorite ant shows. A toddler how to spin a whirligig from a button and string. For a moment the village feels like it belongs to itself. Night begins at the edges and pours in. The last hens step high up their ladder. The ox settles, a big, slow fold of animal, into sleep. Above the fields, the first star nails itself in, and then another. Your father points with his chin. He never points with his hand and names, the ones he knows in the old way. The plough that is 7 bright points. The swan that flies the river of light. The dog that watches the hunter. Your brother adds one. He heard in town a new name that fits and doesn't. It doesn't matter what they're called. They're there. They have always been there. That's the point. Inside, the day shrinks to the circle of the hearth. Your mother does the accounts, in her head flour left, eggs likely, how many days till the fair Agonand, nods as if the numbers have promised to behave. Your sister sits on your feet while you pretend to mind and actually don't. Your brother runs the knife over a bit of leather until the edge tells him it's ready. Your father asks for a story and gets one of those little riddles you're forever collecting. I am taken from a mine and shut up in a wooden case, from which I am never released, and yet I am used by almost every man. He's quiet a while, then grins and says, pencil, which is very wrong and very funny, because there are no pencils here. So he says iron nail, and your mother says lead in a window, and your brother declares it's letters, which Father Thomas would like, and everyone calls that the right kind of right. Charcoal was the answer you were taught. It's also the answer tonight, on your fingers. When the fire goes from flame to glow, your mother douses the red with a careful breath, then sprinkles a few drops so the ash crusts, and tomorrow's ember keeps. She checks the latch, the peg, the place behind the woodpile, without looking like she's checking it. Habit is the best cloak. You lie down in the places that are everyone's places. The straw creaks a little. The wool scratches a little. Your sister steals the better bit of blanket, as she always does. Through the small window, the stars have arranged themselves into whatever story you need. Breath slows. The day loses its edges. Maybe the bishop's man found a different road that runs forever. Maybe Agnes Cooper slipped between 2 trees and wasn't there when anyone looked. Maybe she's 3 parishes away by now, mending a child with honey and cloth in a cottage, where her name is just old woman again. The world is wide and small at once. Both can be true. Tomorrow we'll put tools back in hands. The sheep will meet the shears. The beans will need their weeds humbled. If the wind swings west, there'll be rain by Colin. If not, Father Thomas will walk the hedges alone and mutter about clouds that toy with honest folk. You'll wake when the rooster insists and the ember answers. You'll go where the path says without asking and return by the same. For now, there is this heat near your knees, the slow, sleepy turn of a cow outside, the soft scrape as your father turns on the rushes, the small weight of your sister's hair across your arm. The village keeps watch the way it always has with habit. With luck, with a little learning tucked out of sight, close your eyes. Let the oven's warmth, the mill's thrum, and the bell's round note thin themselves into the kind of silence you can sleep inside. If dreams come, let them be small. Fresh crust, a ribbon's blue, a sky full of old names you don't have to remember to love. Shearing day begins with the smell warm sheep, clean lanolin, crushed clover. The flock waits on the green in a soft fidgeting cloud while the sun lifts itself over the hedges. The shears have been wet until they whisper. A bucket of pitch sits ready to dab the nicks. Edwin shows you the right grip them firm. Fingers light so, the wool comes off in long, proud blankets instead of ragged handfuls. It's like taking winter off a back. Agnes the young holds each ewe's head and talks to it as if it were a fretful child. Your brother works the tar stick, quick as a bird, dot here, line there, to mark what's been done. Children gather the fleeces and pile them into a softness that makes everyone smile without admitting it. Your mother tests a curl between her fingers and says the staple is good this year. She's already counting it into yarn, into warmth. By noon, the flock looks thin and a little embarrassed, all angles and knobby knees. They go out onto the common lighter, as if relieved of a thought. The wool goes to the shed, to be sorted fine from coarse, the clean from the burcot. Hands smell of lanolin all day, and no one minds. The week leans toward midsummer. Father Thomas says St. John's Eve, and smiles in that way he has when the church and the old country are willing to walk together. The hilltop bonfire is stacked since noonbrush, an old thatch and the brittle bones of last year's hedge cuttings. At dusk, the spark catches, and then the flame finds itself and climbs. The whole parish is there in the long light. Wreaths of mugwort and St. John's wort on heads and doors. Bunches of fennel hung high. Someone brings a pipe, someone else a drum. Young men jump the low side of the fire for luck. An old woman warms her hands and calls it sense, not superstition. No one argues. You wander the ring with your sister. She finds a single blue cornflower in the trampled edge and sticks it behind your ear. Your father stands a little apart with the other men and talks rain and wind and how much hay a man can risk cutting on a promise. Your mother shares a cup with Agnes Dayung and lets herself be a girl again for the length of a swallow. Sparks go up like bees going home to a star. Morning brings dew, heavy as silver on the grass. Girls roll the meadows at dawn, laughing that it makes them lovely custom older than anyone remembers. You fetch water, and your shins are wet to the knee. Somewhere in the trees, a cuckoo coughs its two-syllable name into the bright air, and you say harvest soon because that's what a cuckoo means. Not yet. There's hay first. Hay days wake you before your bones are ready. Scythes hang from shoulders like bright crescent moons. The men step into the long grass when the dew still pins it, and the first swath falls with a sound that feels like rightness. You follow with a rake, pulling the green into clean rows. By mid-morning, the sun shakes the wet from the cut. By midday, you're turning it so the underside dries. By afternoon, you're cocking it into small, proud piles against a sky that can change its mind in an hour. It does. A shower shoulders over the hedge, fast as a thought. And everybody runs, every fork lifts, every arm says here and there. Without words, you save what you can, you lose what you must. The air tastes sweet sour, like grass becoming memory. Evenings you sink to the hearth like a stone into a good pond. Your mother rubs a bit of mint between her fingers to clear the field out of your head. Your brother counts blisters as if they were medals. Your father puts a whetstone to the scythe in slow strokes that sound like rain taught itself to sing. On manor court day, the rhythm stutters. The steward sits on a great three-legged stool under the church eaves, with a ledger like a small door on his lap. The reeve stands at his shoulder, wearing importance. Names are called. Amercements fall like small stones into a bucket. a pig in the barley, a fence left low, a path cut across the Lord's meadow where it shouldn't be. You watch Walter the miller blink at a fine for short measure and keep his mouth shut because he knows what happens when it opens. Edwin steps forward about the reeve's inspections at the peddler's cart, voice even, palms up. The steward listens with his face and not his ears. In the end, a penny back for peace, and a glance that says no one should enjoy it. The ledger closes on its own weight. That night, the village pulls itself back around its own fire. Someone mends a net with string that remembers how someone sings a shearing song to a baby and never reaches the end because the baby doesn't need it to. Father Thomas stops by with a joke about a saint who lost his shoes and found his way by following the smell of onions. He leaves with a loaf and a little packet of dried thyme for the infirm. No one mentions the ledger, or they mention it once and allow silence to wash it clean. Days slide closer to the loaf mass, and everyone pretends not to count. You do. The ears in the field are heavy now, cheeks flushed from green to gold. Your father chews a grain and nods in that way that is almost a smile. Your mother says the oven will be hot that morning before the bell even thinks about ringing. Your sister asks if there will be honey on the first crust, and your mother says if the bees think we've behaved. Which means yes, there are still nettles to pull along the ditch edges, and the cow's foot to watch because she's favoring it, and the hen that insists on laying in the hedge instead of the hutch. There's a shirt to turn sleeves swapped, elbows fresh where the frayed places, whereand the new pot to admire irrationally each time it rings true. There's a latch to fix on the byre door, and a promise to keep to your brother about a swim in the stream when the haze in the stream is cold enough to make your ribs squeal. You go anyway, your yells bouncing off the alder trunks. You come home cleaner and happier and pretending not to care about either. On a Thursday, a peddler appears, again not the meek man from spring, but a woman with teeth like neat buttons and a voice that could sell rain to clouds. She has needles, real iron, a twist of indigo she swears is the best ever grown, a small mirror from France that shows you yourself with shocking honesty. Your mother looks into it and snorts and buys a needle. The peddler asks lightly after the bishop's man. No one has seen him in a while. She grins like a fox and says, "Roads are complicated," and the geese hiss and everyone laughs a little too loudly. One late afternoon, you and your father walk the furthest hedge to check where the deer come through. The path you take is one. You could walk blind. You could name the oaks by their bark if forced. At the forest's lip he stops and looks longer than he needs to, as if the trees might answer if given time. He touches the top rail of the gate and says, "We keep our side mended." You say yes, he says, "and we keep our tongues mended, too." You say yes, again. The wind shifts through the leaves with the sound of someone telling the truth under their breath. Lammas morning arrives with a bell rounder than the others. Loaves come out marked with the signs of their houses, carried in on cloths, laid at the altar where the priest's hands bless both bread and ache. Your mother has brushed the crust with water until it shines like a polished thought. When the bell is done, when the blessing is done, when your father has put his penny into the poor box, and your sister has put her stubborn 2 fingers into the holy water and splashed you on purpose, you take the first bite. It is the year in your mouth, rain and sun and hands, scythe and seed and the old, old patience. It is ordinary and holy at once. You think of the mill's thrum of Rainer's chalk marks, of dew on your shins and sparks going up like bees. You think, unexpectedly, of a shawl at the edge of trees and a name no one says now. And you wish her bread somewhere not burned, not taken just bread. Harvest will begin in earnest tomorrow. The sickles are hung ready. The gleaners have argued their corners and made peace because they must. The reeve will count, the steward will tally, the church will sing, and you will cut and carry until the fields give back their gold. There will be blisters and songs, blunted blades and whetstones, laughter that leans into exhaustion, ale that tastes like salvation. Tonight, though, the village is quiet and full. The new loaf sits on the board like a promise kept. Your father nods off in his stool and catches himself with a start. Your mother wraps the second needle in a bit of cloth and tucks it where only she knows. Your brother smooths one last burr from the sickle's edge. Your sister ties and unties the blue ribbon just to feel the knot happen under her fingers. You bank the fire. You check the latch. You look at the marked stone behind the woodpile without looking like you are. You lie down where you always do, to the same straw and the same scratch of wool and the same good weight of another breathing person close enough to touch. Sleep comes, like it always does in honest houses, slowly at first, then all at once. If a breeze lifts the thatch and brings the smell of cut grain and distant smoke, let it carry you. If a dream arrives, let it be a small one-do on ankles, hay in cocks under a sky that keeps its word, a loaf marked with your mother's sign, cooling on a board. And if you need one more thing to hold before you go under, hold this. In a world that promises nothing, ordinary people made bread and shared it and rose again. Harvest begins the way important things do here, with a bell, a breath, and a blade. Before the sun is properly up, the field stands in a hush that is in silence wind in the awns. A lark that forgot to stop, the soft thud of your father's palm against the sickle's back to test its bite. The barley leans toward you, heavy-headed, the color of sleep-warm straw. Women and men step into the first rank together, baskets slung, sickles bright as new moons. The reeve stands at the headland and counts the boon workers under his breath. He'll count again later, because counting is what power does. You fall into the rhythm fast. Left foot, cut, gather, lay. Left foot, cut, gather, lay. The straw burns your forearms. The smell is summer made visible. Children trail behind to bind sheaves with twisted bands, hands learning a knot that will never leave them. Your brother stacks, 6 or 8. Sheaves leaned into one another like conspirators to keep the grain off wet earth. Your mother hums a tune that knows when to breathe. Even if you don't by noon, the field has changed its mind. Where a sea of gold was, now little islands rise in ordered rows. You sit with your back to a stook and eat bread that tastes like the morning and a slice of onion that tastes like honesty. A cup of small ale goes round. Father Thomas crosses the headland with a blessing that is mostly shade for a minute. He says a short word over Edwin's nicked thumb and leaves him a strip of clean linen. Your mother adds honey when no one watches and says nothing as the sting eases. Knowledge travels how it must dot. Afternoons are for mending and the stubborn parts. The corners always hide more work than the middle. Someone starts a song with a chorus so simple even the tired can find it. The tired do. The steward rides the boundary once, twice, and you can feel every back straighten without being told. He notes the tithe sheaf with a stick of charcoal on a smooth chip of wood. He'll send a cart for the church's portion and another for the manors, and somehow there will still be enough to stack in your own poor barn. Because that's the miracle everyone here labors for and never names. Days stack the way the sheaves do. Weather holds. The lark learns your names. Blisters. Open, harden, turn into something like pride. When a cloud bank threatens, you work until your arms sing. When rain finally shouldered over the hedges one afternoon, you have enough under eaves to laugh softly and let it wash you cool. The next morning, steam lifts off the stubble like breath. At the end of the second week, there's only the last stand left awkward and stubborn where the ground dips. Tradition turns everyone careful. The last sheaf isn't a joke here. It's a thing you treat by its true weight. Agnes thy young ties a strip of blue cloth around the stalks, not that Agnes, a girl with more geese than sense. The oldest man in the field takes the cut. He lays the sheaf in your mother's hands, and she twists and tucks, fingers remembering what her mother's fingers knew. It becomes a small figure, a corn queen, a neck, a charm, whatever you were taught to call it in this parish, and it goes home on someone's shoulder like a saint. It will winter by the hearth and go into the first furrows of spring, so the year remembers itself. After the last stooks dry, the carts begin, wheels groan. The oxen lean like patient arguments. In the barn, the air changes to a new dust sweep, dry everywhere. Threshing starts with morning chill while the grain is less flighty. Flails, 2 sticks, married by leather, rise and fall with the pulse of a song only threshers know. The straw gives up what it has been holding. Later, on a day with good wind, you carry baskets out and winnow from one to another while a breeze walks through and takes the chaff with it. The sound is summer made into winter food, husk whispering away, grain talking itself home. The tithe barn's big doors gape. The church's portion goes in, measured, noted, blessed. Your father lays a hand against the beam as you leave and says nothing. Your mother touches the sill with 2 fingers, as if it were a holy place, and maybe it is. The manor's grain goes into its own stomach of oak and dust. Word goes round that the steward has written to the Lord in a fair hand that the yield is sufficient. Nobody repeats that word with its edges on. People say, "Thanks be," or they say nothing at all. Michaelmas creeps up. Geese fattened on the stubble. Wings cradled close like folded opinions. Rent day. Men and women stand in a line that's older than anyone here, a goose under one arm, a pouch of coin in the other, or a sack of oats balanced with stubborn dignity. The steward takes. He always does it with a face as if the taking were a grace. Father Thomas chalks a list to the side where everyone can see, and when the day's adding is done, he wipes a line through the names like a blessing that looks like erasure. A boy with a reed pipe fools a tune out of the afternoon and gets away with it because he's small and the Lord's men have eaten well. Back in the village, supper tastes like geese and sage and something like relief. Stories get larger in proportion to the distance from the day. Someone swears he saw the bishop's man in town buying lamp oil with a purse that wasn't his. Someone else says the man left on a poor horse and a worse direction. A third person says nothing and puts a small bundle into Father Thomas's hands that looks like dried roots, wrapped in waxed cloth. The priest tucks it up his sleeve as if it were a letter, and the line of his mouth doesn't change. The year turns its face toward the early dark. Threshing gives way to gleaning on the field edges. The poor and the widowed gather what was missed, and your mother slips your sister a better basket and a better knot. In the yard, you help your father drive stakes for a new fence against deer that don't read signs. In the byre, the cow's foot is better. Honey, rest, and luck did what they often do together. At the oven, Raina starts her tally with a new Chalk because the old one, like the year, has worn itself down with usefulness. Nights widen, the first frost powders, the lane and breath becomes a thing you can see. Your mother cards wool by the fire. It builds in a lap-high cloud that turns into a thread under her fingers, twist by twist, patience made visible. Your brother takes the flail, turns now, proud, careful, learning to hear when the sticks hit true. Your father counts the sacks in the corner and nods once, a small, private ceremony that means we will get through. On All Hallows, the bell is a little hollow and thoughtful. The church smells of candle and cold stone and bread. Children carry small loaves with crosses nicked in the top and play at giving and asking soul cakes, prayers for the dead, names spoken aloud so they stay. Your mother says 3 names quietly that you have heard all your life and one she never used to say. You repeat them under your breath because that's how time works here. Spoken, remembered, passed along. After, when the wind finds the corners of the village and makes them sing. You tell a soft story about a woman who listens to plants and walks where the trees lean together. And you call her someone and nobody asks who. Your sister sleeps with her mouth open like a question. Your father throws one more split log on the fire and calls it a night. Soon there will be slaughtering day salt and smoke and work that leaves a smell in the rafters. Until spring. Soon there will be spinning evenings, so long the wheel seems to turn on its own. Soon there will be the hedges to lay, the ditch to clean, the cart to grease, the ox to curry until his hide shines like a polished thought. The first snow will fall and then fall again and then decide to stay a while. And the village will fold smaller and warmer and tell old tales in voices that know how to fall asleep mid-sentence. For now, tonight, the barn is full enough to make a man breathe easier. The corn queen hangs above the hearth, a small straw. Promise, the new pot has a soft ring when you set it down, a note that says true. Your mother ties the blue ribbon back on your sister's braid with a knot that won't give up without a fight. Your brother sets the flail against the wall like a spear after a day's battle and grins at it like a friend. Your father scratches one last note on the tally stick and smooths the mark with his thumb as if to seal it. You bank the fire. You check the peg. You touch the marked stone behind the wood pile the way sailors touch ship beams. Not because wood hears, but because habits do. Lie down. Let the fields whisper, turn back into sleep. If you need a picture to soften the dark, take this one. A barn smelling of grain and quiet. A little figure of straw watching the door. Frost lacing the lane neat as stitches. And far beyond the hedges, the old forest holding its breath, as if winter were a story starting soft. Winter sidles in on a smell. You know, smoke a little thicker. Air like iron, the sour sweet of apples, keeping well or not, the loft floor. Morning's bite, breath hangs. The lane rings under boots. Martinmas brings the day that is work and gratitude at once. The pig. The men set the tub, water steams, like a small fog. The killing is quick, because quick is mercy. After, the village becomes a clean industry salt, knives, steam. Talk that stays steady. Your mother renders fat into lard that will see you through, pours it white and quiet into crocks. Blood becomes pudding with oats and onion. Intestines become strings for sausages. Head becomes brawn. Bones promise broth when January is mean. Someone always says, everything but the squeal, and someone always snorts as if it were new. The smokehouse takes its share. Hams disappear into brown, slow weather. Nights stretch. Rush lights come out. Pith pulled from marsh rush, dried. and dipped in leftover fat. They burn like the poor cousins of brew day arrives like a promise kept. Malted barley smells like bread before it remembers it will be ale. The mash tun steams. Agnes the ong stirs with a paddle the length of a good story. You skim, you strain, you boil with a handful of green. Hopcone's father, Thomas, swears will be common as cabbage before we're all dust. The work cools, yeast finds it like a homing bird, and the air shifts from sweet to something alive and busy. 2 days later, the alewife sets a sprig of birch above the door, the ancient sign to any passer-by who thirsts. The ale tester, a man who takes himself very seriously, comes with a spoon and a face. He tastes, he nods, he says sound, and the village relaxes by a visible inch. On a soft afternoon, you hear it before you see it. A rope of bees, a living scarf, leaving the old hive like a thought that decided to walk. The cluster settles on the low limb of an apple tree, humming like a prayer. Your mother goes bareheaded and gentle-handed under them with a rush basket. She taps the bow. The bees pour like grain, like water, like something that knows its own mind. You set them in a new scap and whisper the old rhyme about telling the bees your news so they'll keep the house's heart. The next morning they're flying tiny commas, stitching flowers to the air. May comes wearing garlands. Children run wreaths of hawthorn and cowslip up on door pegs. A green switch leans above the byre. Someone hangs a posy on the church latch, and Father Thomas leaves it there. On May Day, the pole goes up long, straight, borrowed from the Lord's coppice, with proper permission, which is to say, none. Ribbons twist. Feet learn a dance that seems complicated until it doesn't. Bread tastes different outside. You watch a boy you used to race make a foolish face at a girl who will forgive him, until she doesn't. Edwin plays a tune on a pipe with 3 holes and a stubborn reed that makes even the tired want to pretend not to be. Not everything comes easy. A cough runs through the cottages one damp week and takes your youngest sister down into a small, hot silence. Your mother crushes willow bark. Father Thomas prays over water. You hold the bowl while steam rises into the tight air and wait for her to take it. She does. It takes 2 nights and your mother's eyes going red at the corners. On the 3rd morning the fever loosens its fist and moves on. You give thanks, messy and untheological and exactly right. That afternoon, quietly, your mother ties a single rag of white on the elder by the brook, where the wind can read it. No one speaks of it. Everyone sees. Rogation days circle back procession along the bounds with a psalm under your breath and a willow switch in hand. Hedge, oak, ditch, stone, the words and the places rhyme now. At the 3 parish stone, Father Thomas thumps the boys lightly and names the line. You could walk it in the dark without your feet asking questions, Whitson. Brightens the green with Sunday clothes and a barrel tapped under watchful eyes. The church fills with red and gold. After, the green fills with wrestling matches that start friendly and stay there because the steward is watching. The parish bow staves come out from under beds. Men string them with linen that sings when you draw. Targets bundles of straw pinned with a rag move farther away than seems reasonable until the first arrow. Your father's plants itself and quivers like a satisfied thought. You try and hit honest grass. Your brother laughs and shows you the trick of the shoulder instead of the arm. By evening you can land 1 out of 5, which is how anything starts. Sir William rides past once this month, not grand, just deliberate. He nods to the steward and to no one else. A week later, 3 men mending the bridge say, the Lord approved a new plank and a half-day's ale in return. People call it good management, and then mention the mill fees again in voices you can hardly hear. Balance is an art in a place where scales are never level. The mill never stops. The wheel's song changes with the water's mood, quick when snowmelt runs, thoughtful when the stream thinks. Walter's measure is watched with two sets of eyes, now his and yours, and the third scoop that used to slide easy has learned to hesitate. Edwin's complaint at Manor Court did something small and real. The steward's face is still a closed door. The reeve's hand is still a pocket. But sunlight got in around the edges. Sometimes that is enough to make a day bend a different way. One noon, a rider from town clatters through with rumors braided into his horse's foam. Prices up on wool, down on salt, a band of outlaws taken north of the forest, a fish at the fair. That looked like a man in the face. He buys a mug under the birch sprig and leaves dust and talk behind. Talk is food when work is the same shape day after day. Pentecost reigns clear after all. The fields go from hopeful to certain almost overnight. You can see grain deepen, same as a child gains height against a doorpost. Your father chews one and nods. Saints within willing, he says. And that is the proper amount of faith for a man who has seen clouds lie on a late light evening. Father Thomas walks your lane without purpose and sits on your doorstone the way stones invite. He watches your mother spin a while, then says with a voice you have to lean to hear, "There's a convent 2 days' walk from here." They take in girls to learn reading and reckoning in return for a season's cheese. Not to stay, to learn. Your sister looks up as if her name had been spoken. Your mother's mouth opens and closes once. Your father rubs the back of his neck with a hand that has no easy. "We'll reckon," he says. "We'll see." Father Thomas doesn't push. He just tells how many letters sit in the word bread, and how the abbess counts them with her thumb, and how a girl who can count loaves can count seed and pennies and geese, and how that is a net a family can fish with. He leaves as light leaves the sill, and the talk waits until after the little ones sleep. You don't decide. Not yet, but the idea stands in the corner like a guest who might stay if asked twice. By midsummer, again the bonfire is stacked, the wreaths go on. The old songs know their roots around the fire, and so do the feet. A fox slips along the hedge as if it had an invitation. Sparks toss themselves into the warm dark like bees going home to a star. Someone says a name not said in a year. No one shushes them. You look at the elder by the brook in the morning, and the white scrap is gone. Weather, water, hand. Who can say tomorrow there will be scythes to wet, a ditch to clear, a fence to set right. The year keeps its circles, but tonight the pole stands, the beer is sound. The child with a blue ribbon in her hair stitches this moment into the fabric of herself, and the old men warm their hands and tell the same story they always tell about the winter of 22, and the bread that didn't run out at the last. You sit and breathe, and let the bellies of the flames do their slow, old work on your thinking. When you lie down, the horn pane shows a sky that refuses to quit. The ember under ash says, "I'm here." The ox shifts once, like a good thought, turning over if sleep takes its time. Count the things that returned this year, the way they always do. The lark, the nettles, the rushlights, the bees. The blessing at the gap, the first furrow's smell, the laugh that saves a day from breaking, the hand that finds yours under a rough blanket and says without words what people have. always said, when the world is both hard and enough, close your eyes, the field will wait. So will tomorrow. Harvest waits a little way off, yet grain still, milky, if you press it so. The village turns to everything that ripens between. The flax is ready. You pull it by the roots, not cut it. Fingers squeaking where the stalks polish your skin. Bundles stand in sheaves to dry, then go to the retting pond, where time and water do their soft, patient work. Days later, you lift them out to smell like pond and linen dreaming. Beat them, break them, scutch them until fiber shows its pale hair. Your mother draws a handful through the hackle's iron teeth. It combs into cloud. Thread will come from this, and shirts, and winter light caught in cloth. In the garden, beans string themselves like rosaries. You pick with both hands the sound, like quiet applause. Peas rattle dry in their pods. You save seed back in a clay jar marked with a notch. The first apples fall with a thud you can feel through your soles. The good ones go to the loft, the bruised to the pot, the cause to the pig. Everything has a place. Everything becomes something. A letter comes sif, a half-dozen lines on a wax. Tablet brought by a lay brother can be called a letter. It bears your sister's scratchings from the convent 2 days' walk away. Crooked lines, careful marks, a name that is hers, now the way a ribbon is. She writes of the bell's tidy hours, of a garden where physic herbs stand like soldiers, sage, rue, betony, of bread with a crust like yours, and a crumb that behaves better, of a woman who can count faster than a mill wheel turns. The abbess says she is quick. The abbess says the tongue and the hand should both know how to measure. Your mother reads the marks with Father Thomas's help, and then with less help, and then alone, and then she tucks the tablet into the chest like a blessing. That can be reopened. Brew day arrives like a promise kept. Malted barley smells like bread before it remembers it will be ale. The mash tun steams. Agnes the Ong stirs with a paddle the length of a good story. You skim, you strain, you boil with a handful of green. Hopcone's father, Thomas, swears will be common as cabbage before we're all dust. The work cools, yeast finds it like a homing bird, and the air shifts from sweet to something alive and busy. 2 days later, the alewife sets a sprig of birch above the door, the ancient sign to any passer-by who thirsts. The ale-tester, a man who takes himself very seriously, comes with a spoon and a face. He tastes, he nods, he says sound, and the village relaxes by a visible inch. On a soft afternoon, you hear it before you see it. A rope of bees, a living scarf, leaving the old hive like a thought that decided to walk. The cluster settles on the low limb of an apple tree, humming like a prayer. Your mother goes bareheaded and gentle-handed under them with a rush basket. She taps the bow. The bees pour like grain, like water, like something that knows its own mind. You set them in a new scap and whisper the old rhyme about telling the bees your news so they'll keep the house's heart. The next morning they're flying tiny commas, stitching flowers to the air. May comes wearing garlands. Children run wreaths of hawthorn and cowslip up on door pegs. A green switch leans above the byre. Someone hangs a posy on the church latch, and Father Thomas leaves it there. On May Day, the pole goes up long, straight, borrowed from the Lord's coppice, with proper permission, which is to say, none. Ribbons twist. Feet learn a dance that seems complicated until it doesn't. Bread tastes different outside. You watch a boy you used to race make a foolish face at a girl who will forgive him, until she doesn't. Edwin plays a tune on a pipe with 3 holes and a stubborn reed that makes even the tired one to pretend not to be. Not everything comes easy. A cough runs through the cottages one damp week and takes your youngest sister down into a small, hot silence. Your mother crushes willow bark. Father Thomas prays over water. You hold the bowl while steam rises into the tight air and wait for her to take it. She does. It takes 2 nights and your mother's eyes going red at the corners. On the 3rd morning the fever loosens its fist and moves on. You give thanks, messy and untheological and exactly right. That afternoon, quietly, your mother ties a single rag of white on the elder by the brook, where the wind can read it. No one speaks of it. Everyone sees. Rogation days circle back procession along the bounds with a psalm under your breath and a willow switch in hand. Hedge, oak, ditch, stone, the words and the places rhyme now. At the 3 parish stone, Father Thomas thumps the boys lightly and names the line. You could walk it in the dark without your feet asking questions, Whitson. Brightens the green with Sunday clothes and a barrel tapped under watchful eyes. The church fills with red and gold. After, the green fills with wrestling matches that start friendly and stay there because the steward is watching. The parish bow staves come out from under beds. Men string them with linen that sings when you draw. Targets bundles of straw pinned with a rag move farther away than seems reasonable until the first arrow. Your father's plants itself and quivers like a satisfied thought. You try and hit honest grass. Your brother laughs and shows you the trick of the shoulder instead of the arm. By evening you can land 1 out of 5, which is how anything starts. Sir William rides past once this month, not grand, just deliberate. He nods to the steward and to no one else. A week later, 3 men mending the bridge say, "The Lord approved a new plank and a half-day's ale in return." People call it good management and then mention the mill fees again in voices you can hardly hear. Balance is an art in a place where scales are never level. The mill never stops. The wheel's song changes with the water's mood, quick when snowmelt runs, thoughtful when the stream thinks. Walter's measure is watched with 2 sets of eyes, now his and yours, and the 3rd scoop that used to slide easy has learned to hesitate. Edwin's complaint at Manor Court did something small and real. The steward's face is still a closed door. The reeve's hand is still a pocket. But sunlight got in around the edges. Sometimes that is enough to make a day bend a different way. One noon, a rider from town clatters through with rumors braided into his horse's foam. Prices up on wool, down on salt, a band of outlaws taken north of the forest, a fish at the fair. That looked like a man in the face. He buys a mug under the birch sprig and leaves dust and talk behind. Talk is food when work is the same shape day after day. Pentecost reigns clear after all. The fields go from hopeful to certain almost overnight. You can see grain deepen, same as a child gains height against a doorpost. Your father chews one and nods. "Saint Swithin willing," he says. And that is the proper amount of faith for a man who has seen clouds lie on a late light evening. Father Thomas walks your lane without purpose and sits on your doorstone the way stones invite. He watches your mother spin a while, then says with a voice you have to lean to hear, "There's a convent 2 days' walk from here. They take in girls to learn reading and reckoning in return for a season's cheese. Not to stay, to learn." Your sister looks up as if her name had been spoken. Your mother's mouth opens and closes once. Your father rubs the back of his neck with a hand that has no easy. "We'll reckon," he says. We'll see. Father Thomas doesn't push. He just tells how many letters sit in the word bread, and how the abbess counts them with her thumb, and how a girl who can count loaves can count seed and pennies and geese, and how that is a net a family can fish with. He leaves as light leaves the sill, and the talk waits until after the little ones sleep. You don't decide. Not yet, but the idea stands in the corner like a guest who might stay if asked twice. By midsummer, again, the bonfire is stacked, the wreaths go on. The old songs know their roots around the fire, and so do the feet. A fox slips along the hedge as if it had an invitation. Sparks toss themselves into the warm dark like bees going home to a star. Someone says a name not said in a year. No one shushes them. You look at the elder by the brook in the morning, and the white scrap is gone. Weather, water, hand. Who can say tomorrow there will be scythes to wet, a ditch to clear, a fence to set right. The year keeps its circles, but tonight the pole stands, the beer is sound. The child with a blue ribbon in her hair stitches this moment into the fabric of herself, and the old men warm their hands and tell the same story they always tell about the winter of 22, and the bread that didn't run out at the last. You sit and breathe, and let the bellies of the flames do their slow, old work on your thinking. When you lie down, the horn pane shows a sky that refuses to quit. The ember under ash says, I'm here. The ox shifts once, like a good thought, turning over if sleep takes its time. Count the things that returned this year, the way they always do. The lark, the nettles, the rushlights, the bees. The blessing at the gap, the first furrow's smell, the laugh that saves a day from breaking, the hand that finds yours under a rough blanket and says without words what people have always said when the world is both hard and enough. Close your eyes, the field will wait. So will tomorrow. Harvest waits a little way off, yet grain still, milky, if you press it so. The village turns to everything that ripens between. The flax is ready. You pull it by the roots, not cut it. Fingers squeaking where the stalks polish your skin. Bundles stand in sheaves to dry, then go to the retting pond where time and water do their soft, patient work. Days later, you lift them out to smell like pond and linen dreaming. Beat them, break them, scutch them until fiber shows its pale hair. Your mother draws a handful through the hackle's iron teeth. It combs into cloud. Thread will come from this, and shirts and winter light caught in cloth. In the garden, beans string themselves like rosaries. You pick with both hands the sound, like quiet applause. Peas rattle dry in their pods. You save seed back in a clay jar marked with a notch. The first apples fall with a thud you can feel through your soles. The good ones go to the loft, the bruised to the pot, the cause to the pig. Everything has a place. Everything becomes something. A letter comes sif, a half dozen lines on a wax. Tablet brought by a lay brother can be called a letter. It bears your sister's scratchings from the convent 2 days' walk away. Crooked lines, careful marks, a name that is hers, now the way a ribbon is. She writes of the bell's tidy hours, of a garden where physic herbs stand like soldiers, sage, rue, betony, of bread with a crust like yours and a crumb that behaves better, of a woman who can count faster than a mill wheel turns. The abbess says she is quick. The abbess says the tongue and the hand should both know how to measure. Your mother reads the marks with Father Thomas's help, and then with less help, and then alone, and then she tucks the tablet into the chest like a blessing. that can be reopened. At Thornfield, word trickles through. Sir William coughs this summer in a way that makes sound gather in doorways. He rides out less. His son Henry rides out more, slower. Catherine is married off to the Pembroke lad after Alclosa lands. A kinder talk, a dowry that leaves Thornfield breathing but not boasting. Men say the blue tunic comes out fewer feast days. Women say Lady Elenina still holds herself like a ship that knows harbours. The steward remains a gate with hinges that squeak only for coins. A storm shoulders over the hills one afternoon, thick and green at the edges. You hawk sheaves under eaves and stack what's already dry higher. The thunder rolls like barrels in a cellar. The rain comes down in cords. When it passes, the lane is a shallow river, the ditch a deeper one, and a strip of thatch on Edwin's roof hangs like an old tongue. Before he asks, 3 men are up the ladder, passing new reed like a prayer from hand to hand. No one takes wages. The pay is that tomorrow it could be your roof. Edwin grumbles anyway. Gratitude sounds like scolding in his mouth, and mother smiles because she understands languages. On a town day, you go in with a short list and come back with stories larger than your basket. A clerk at the Guildhall lets you touch his seal. Matrix, heavy, cold. The lion's face, neat and flat. A fuller thump's cloth in the trough, with feet that have forgotten other dancers. A woman in a yellow hood sells you a scrap of thread the colour of heartwood. Your mother plans to hide it in a hem for joy. Near the market cross, a boy reads aloud a notice in French that half the town pretends to understand. It boils down to tolls, which everyone understands. You pass the church on your way out and light a candle with a thought you don't name. As you're leaving, you catch sight of a woman with her shawl pinned tight and her hands clean in a way that speaks of water you can't carry. She looks at you without looking at you. You nod in the small way people do when roads have been complicated. The candle flame blows a little when the door opens. When you turn back, she is gone like a good rumour, useful and unproved by Lameses. Echo, the barley says yes. Harvest runs like a hymn you know by heart. This year the wind behaves. This year the carts don't mire. This year the steward's charcoal marks don't bite into your sleep. You still feel each tithe in your shoulders, but the barn holds more than it held last year. And your father lets his hand rest on the doorbeam longer, threshing draws, swallows. To the yard, their blue-black coats cutting the air fine. They swallow the gnats that rise from the straw like a second harvest. Father Thomas quotes something about mouths being filled and birds being clothed, and grins at his own joke until your brother throws a bit of chaff at him. Michaelmas geese waddle to their fates with comic dignity. Rent paid, backs eased. You taste a slice of fat that remembers summer grass and doesn't apologize. The steward's ledger closes. The beadle's rod taps the ground twice. The world continues. Your sister comes home at Martinmas with hands that know letters and a mind that counts faster than the stew boils. She shows you how to mark sacks without cutting them open, how to reckon seed against furrow with a little chalk on a smooth board, how to make neat tallies that add up the same way twice. She still runs to see the bees in the sun and ties her ribbon too tight. She's both who left and not. Winter comes like it does slow, and then, all at once, the pig renders into usefulness. Rushlights learn the house again. Your mother spins. Your sister reads the psalm headings for Father Thomas and beams fit to light the porch. Your brother thumps the flail and sings a line under his breath. Your father checks pegs and pins and says nothing that isn't necessary. The new pot rings. True, every time you set it down, snow tells on everything. Fox prints plate the lane. Birds stitch their feet across the green. Somewhere out where the hedge meets the wood, bootless steps print light and shore. The kind winter erases with its own hand before anyone can make a story that needs witnesses. On a night when the wind fingers every crack, your mother pulls a small twist of waxed cloth from under the chest's false footer, place you didn't know was there. She unties it. Inside the old herbs wait, dry but not dead. She puts a pinch of this, a crumb of that into water, names them in a whisper. Yarrow for bleeding, betony for heads, thyme for air that won't move. She shows your sister how steam belongs over a bowl and under a blanket. Learn, she says, not brave, not sly, just the way one says, eat. Learn and mind the saints, and mind what plants say under your hands. Candlemas candles are blessed. One goes up on the beam. A thaw loosens the lane into honest mud. Lambs topple into existence. The plough comes into the church, blade shining a little like a laugh. Father Thomas pats the beam and talks about straight furrows and crooked hearts, and nobody minds because the sermon is short. The first day you open the door and smell something green, your father stands in the gap like a man who has found an old friend. He runs his palm along the plough's worn wood and nods to the ox. He doesn't say, ready. The furrow does. You step into the field with seed in your apron and hope in your mouth, where a prayer would be if you could spare the words, step, cast, hope. The year turns on small hinges you can oil and larger ones you can only bow your head to. If your eyes are still open, let them soften on the embers. Lay your hand flat on the blanket and feel the woven year under your palm. Flax to fiber, fiber to thread, thread to cloth. Grain to bread, bread to strength, strength to song. Somewhere the convent bell rings a tidy hour. Somewhere a steward adds 2 and 2 and gets enough. Somewhere under an elder, a white rag you didn't tie yourself flutters and looks like a small, stubborn flag. You are here. The roof holds. The pot rings true. The seed takes. Sleep springs steadies. Seed sits where you cast it, the soil lying over it like a good secret. Skylarks get bold. The ditch forgets winter and remembers how to talk. Fair talk returns the kind that starts as a maybe and becomes a list. Eggs, if the shells don't crack on the road. 2 small cheeses. A skein of your mother's best flax, thread the one that shines like winter light. A bundle of willow clothespins your brother carved. You go on foot at first light, a little caravan of usefulness. You, your father, your sister with a ribbon she swears won't come loose. The road smells of carts and hawthorn. Travellers sort themselves without a word. Pilgrims together, packmen together, parish folk in clusters. A reeve from another manor nods to yours, and they perform that cautious dance officials do. Halfway between greeting and measuring, town throws itself at you all at once. Bell, hide, divats, steaming like soup. Fish that shouldn't be this far. Inland, a boy crying pies, a woman selling salt with a voice that cuts. Near the cross, players bang boards together for a miracle play. A devil in red wool trips on his own tail, and the crowd forgives him because devils ought to be clumsy in daylight. Your mother's thread goes first, bought by a weaver whose hands tell you he knows what to do with it. The eggs find a baker. The cheeses find a widow with a look that says feast day. Your sister stops dead beneath a painted sign and reads it without Father Thomas. Her mouth shapes each letter like it's bread. Your father doesn't say anything, which is the loudest approval he has. At the bowhere's stall, your brother runs his thumb along a stave, and the bowhere watches his hand the way fishermen watch water. Draw, the man says, and your brother does. Not far, not foolish, just enough to learn what his shoulder can do. A man in a shabby blue coat, with a badge on a throngsome kind of muster. Clerk makes a note with a little crow's feet grin. Sundays after Mass, he tells the heir, practice keeps wolves out better than prayers do. Father Thomas would argue that sentence the other way round and still shake the man's hand. There's talk near the Guildhall, levy this, scutage that, the king's men buying bread by the cart and paying in promises. The steward's face, when you pass him, looks like it always does a door that opens when coins speak the language. You buy a small knife, honest iron, that will live on your belt and do 100 quiet jobs without boasting. Back home, the fields have changed color by thinking. Blade shows between clods, beans take grip, peas climb straw the way children climb furniture. On the second Sunday after the fair, a rag target appears behind the church. A straw, but behind that, the reeve announces customary practice in a voice that tries to be generous and lands on officious. Men string bows. Boys watch with shoulders ready to learn. Father Thomas blesses the range and then steps aside, so the arrows can do their work without theological clutter. Not every week is good. One morning the cow is wrong standing, like she forgot how breathed fast. Your mother's hand finds heat in the udder. The milk has clots like bad thoughts. Father Thomas brings holy water because that's his tool. The farrier brings vinegar and strips of clean cloth because that's his. Your mother brings rosemary and patience because that's what never fails. You hold the tail and get kicked once in the shin and call it an education. On the third day the swelling goes down. On the fourth she chews like someone remembering lunch. The barn breathes again. A hard rain comes from nowhere one afternoon and pretends it was always coming. The stream takes offense and climbs its banks. The footbridge tilts like a tired thought. 3 men, 2 women, and a boy who wants to be treated like a man are out there with poles and rope before anyone asks. They brace, lift, curse, laugh. The bridge shoulders back into place with a noise like honesty. No one writes it down. Everyone will remember anyway. Your sister's new numbers find work. She chalks on a board furrows, seed, saxand shows. Your father, how what goes out and what comes in might behave better if you're kinder to the poor corner and meaner to the generous one. He listens like a man hearing a good story from a stranger, suspicious at first, then pleased to know it. When they agree on a change, they don't announce it. They just do it. The earth will give its verdict soon enough. News from Thornfield runs thin and sharp. Sir William rides less. When he does, he coughs into a cloth that disappears into a servant's sleeve. Henry rides more and waves less. Lady Elenina still comes to the door with a straight back and a list that gets done. The steward posts. A new mill rule hours set. Fees firm on the church door in a hand that wants to be law and is, mostly, because ink near a church carries weight. Summer does what it's for. The barley heads up and bows a little. A polite nod you'll return with a sickle when it's time. The biskep hums, steady as a hymn you can sing and work by. Your mother pulls flax fibre through the hackle and it becomes weather-made into thread. One evening, late and kind, you take the long path by the elder and don't mean anything by it. There's a white rag there again, tied with the knot your mother uses when she's thinking about more than what she's tying. A bundle sits under the bush, waxed cloth around something small. You don't open it there. You're not a fool. At home, it's a twist of dried leaves and a note scratched on bark with soot for fevers. The hand is not any hand you know, or maybe it is, except the years have made it right smaller. Your mother doesn't smile. She puts the packet under the beam near the Candlemas taper and says, "Good," as if she were talking about whether harvest comes early by 2 days, late by 3 in another field, right on time where your sisters. Chalk said it would. You cut and bind until your shoulders forget the old shape of themselves. The steward rides by and counts without moving his lips. The reeve marks tides with charcoal. Father Thomas says a blessing so short even God has to lean in to catch it. The barn takes sacks and sighs the way buildings do when they're asked to do the work they were built for. Michaelmas geese pay rent with necks and fat. The ledger closes with a crack you feel in your teeth. Your father runs his thumb over the tally stick until the notch shines and nods once. Enough. The word feels like bread. Your sister comes back from the convent for good this time, with a way of binding lists so they behave, and a head full of saint stories that make the children sleep faster. She shows you how to tally sheep on a string with knots you can read in the dark. She still runs to the hive when sun hits it right. She is changed and not, which is the best way to be. Winter slides its hand into the room again. The pig gives what pigs give. The rushlights do their thin, honest work. Father Thomas reads by a fire that pops and says nothing about the devil because your youngest is listening. Your mother pulls a packet from the beam when a cough comes through the village and uses it without ceremony. The fever goes in 2 days, instead of 4 in your house. You say thank you without naming anyone in particular. Sometimes gratitude doesn't need a direction. When Candlemas candles are blessed, one comes home to your beam as usual. Outside, the lane shines the way lanes do when frost remembers how. Lambs land in the world like questions with legs. Father Thomas blesses the plough. Your mother ties the corn queen straw to the beam with new thread. Your father looks at the field as if it were both map and letter. And one morning, simple as a breath, you smell green again. Your father sets the coulter, the ox leans, the plough opens the first sentence of the year. You walk and cast and hope like always. Your sister chalks and counts and hums. Your mother spins. Your brother draws a bow after mass because the blue-coated clerk said so and because he wants to. The steward writes. The reeve watches, the mill turns, the hive wakes. The elder keeps its counsel. Night settles. The horn pane holds one last sleepy stripe of light. The ember under ash says, I'm here. The pot rings true when you set it down. If your mind wants something to keep, take this. A white rag where it should be. A beam with a candle that will be enough. Numbers that add the same way twice. And seed that doesn't ask for promises you can't make. Just hands that remember what to do when the bell says begin. Close your eyes. The year will wait while you rest. Spring tips into early heat and then thinks better of it. Showers walk the fields in small, polite steps. The ditch forgets itself twice and remembers again. You work with your sleeves rolled and your jaw unclenched, the kind of weather that makes a man generous to a stone that trips him. The fair hangs in memory like a bright ribbon, but lists return to the shape of work. Your sister's chalk lives. On a small board by the door, now seed furrows, the week's bread, to skeins promised to a neighbour. She writes neat little saints' letters by the dates and grins. When your father pretends not to notice, he's started counting by them. On a Sunday after Mass, the blue-coated muster clerk from town turns up with a bundle of spare bowstrings and a look that says orders. Men line the green. Boys stand off with shoulders already learning. You loose a clumsy arrow and bless the grass that receives it. Your brother's shaft thuds into the rag on the straw, but just off center. The clerk nods once and makes a mark on a scrap. Saints keep us, Father Thomas mutters, half to the sky, half to the steward, who is counting heads like seed. A dry spell arrives 1 week too early and then stays 1 week too long. The well holds, but lo, the stream complains. Your mothers, bean rose droop midday, rally by night. At rogation, you carry willow switches along the bounds and tap the stones as if you could wake rain with your knuckles. At the 3 parish oak, Father Thomas turns his face up and says, Saint Swithin, be reasonable. The lark sings anyway. 2 days later, a heavy tray of cloud sets itself down on the hills and spills with a sigh like a field putting its feet up. You stand in the doorway and let it catch your face. Everyone pretends they knew it would come. Thornfield changes quiet as a room with a sleeping child. Sir William rides out once with his cloak held close and doesn't quite make the lane. After that, Henry rides. He sits straight and grinds his jaw and looks at fields like a man trying to memorize 2 sums at once. Lady Elenina walks the herb border in the manor garden with a scarf at her throat, speaking low to the steward. The steward speaks back. In coin, the word on the green is that Sir William's cough has gone deep. The word in the bakehouse is that Lady Elenina keeps the household like a ship with no slop in its wake. Both can be true. One noon, a loud voice skews the usual quiet by the mill. Walter has shaved the measure again, too bold by a finger's width. Before your father can let the irritation turn into a wrong word, your sister steps between weights. And temper? Show us, she says, tying her ribbon back like she means business. She weighs empty and full, chalks the difference, turns the scoop upside down on the board and traces its mouth. You take the thickness twice, she says, tapping. Once when you fill, once when you pour. Father Thomas, who has seen arithmetic turn water into wine in his own way, says mildly, it seems the young mistress is right. The steward's man, who has no interest in being wrong in public, scowls at Walter and says, correct it. He does. It sticks maybe. From shame, maybe from sunlight. Either way, flour weighs more honest that week. A peddler comes through with trouble stitched to his tongue. Bandits north of the wood. A levy south. A bishop writing letters about sin and fish on Fridays, as if fish weren't a kind of sin when it's gone off. He sells you a whetstone that sings true and an iron hook for the byre door. He sells your brother a story about a man who shot a coin from a pole at 20 paces. Your brother tests his shoulder that evening until your mother tells him to save his elbows for something that feeds you. June fattens. Butter goes yellow. The hive thrums like a throat singing. On an afternoon with air like warm cloth, the bees swarm again, a rope of living amber. You and your mother coax them into a spare skep with the old rhyme and a branch tap-tap like knuckles. On a friendly door, she leans to the hive and whispers, house, news births, deaths. A pinch of worry about the well-end. You do not smile because you've lived long enough to know what knowledge needs to travel. A small fever runs the lane. Not a bad one, no saint called in by name, but enough to put 2 children on pallets in the shade, with wet cloths and sour faces. Your mother brews from the packet that found you under the elder. Father Thomas blesses the bowl in passing and does not ask what's in it. 3 days later, there's chalk dust on the threshold again, and 2 children eating bread like it hurt their feelings to have been made to wait. Manor court meets under a sky so clear it feels like a decision. Edwin steps forward with measured calm about the reeve's customary inspections at carts. He shows the steward a tally cord he's kept knots for coins taken this summer that never found their way to any ledger. The steward's face stays adore. Father Thomas says, "For peace." The steward returns 3 knots worth and says, "For order." Edwin nods like a man who knows a small victory when it shakes his hand. The reeve counts rats on the church roof for a week and then behaves himself long enough to make people wary, which is a sort of relief. Then one evening the manor bells ring wrong. Not feast, not fire, a thin, hard pattern that means come. See, people climb the lane like breath climbing a chest. In the hall, the blue tunic lies folded. Sir William lies beside it, hands crossed, mouth set the way you set a latch at night. Lady Elenina's face is ashore after a storm, nothing left to come in, nothing willing to go out. Henry kneels. The steward stands like a line in a book. Father Thomas says the words that stop being words and become the thing itself. Soil to soil, mercy enough for what mercy can do. You take your cap off and hold it chest high, and think how a man can be a weight and a weather at once, and how the weather has changed. Henry is lord now. He rides the bounds twice in a week, slow where his father was quick, counting as if numbers might turn into hedges by looking hard enough. The steward tests his edges and finds them young but not soft. A new hand goes up at the mill, hours stricter, measure watched, fees unchanged. The village breathes out through its teeth and carries on. Grain doesn't wait for grief. The hedge doesn't lay itself. By late July, the barley nods heavy shore. The dry spell didn't bite. The rain didn't rot. You test a head between. Teeth in the starch, says soon. The bell calls harvest with a tone rounder than prayer. You step into the first rank with the other's left foot. Cut, gather, lay in the field answers in that dear old way, giving itself up in useful surrender. The reeve counts. The steward rides the headland once at noon and once in the cool, making figures only he enjoys. Father Thomas walks the margin with a blessing that is mostly shade and a mug passed hand to hand. This year the cutting feels like a song you could sing in your sleep. Fewer surprises, more rhythm. Your sister's chalk guesses were right more often than not. Your brother can stack stooks so they look like they grew that way. Your mother's hands never forget how to twist a band tight by the last tuck. You learn to keep your complaints where your tongue can't trip over them. When the last stubborn stand is tied with a blue scrap, the old man takes the last cut like he has every year since your first memory had edges. He passes it to your mother. She makes the corn queen again neater this year, somehow, and sets it above the hearth. Mind the mice, she tells it, as if it had responsibilities. Threshing returns the barn to its truest voice. Flails rise and fall, clean as a chant. On winnowing day, the wind shows up when called and takes the husk with good manners. The grain comes down heavy as the right kind of sleep. Sacks line the wall like soldiers, and you love them like you're not supposed to love things. Michaelmas brings geese with opinions, and rent with no opinions at all. Henry sits the hall's end for the first time, accepting birds and oats and coins, with a face that tries to be both his father's and his own. He signs his name in a good strong hand you recognize from the posted rules. Henricus, the steward. Scratches totals. Father Thomas makes a neat column on slate where everyone can see. When the ledger snaps shut, the sound runs through you like honest cold. Done for the year. For this part, anyway. Your sister asks if she might keep the tally. Bored after rents, only until Candlemas. And Henry says yes, before the steward can say no. She comes home with more columns to keep. Milk, eggs, a whispered plan about selling a skein a month instead of a heap in a rush when the fair shouts. Your father listens like a man watching a new scythe find its shine. Your mother hands your sister the good chalk. Winter edges into the evenings and then into the mornings. The pig gives itself to salt and smoke and gratitude. Rushlights make their thin light and do not complain. Father Thomas brings psalms and a new riddle. Your youngest answers wrong in 4 hilarious ways and then falls asleep on his own laugh. The hive sleeps, but you can hear, if you lay your ear to the skep, a small, steady industry, like a thought-keeping house in the dark. One night the wind works every chink in the wall and still can't find a story to move you from your place. Your mother lifts the false foot from the chest and takes out a packet dryer now, but not dead. Not much left, she says, then smiles at the beam where the Candlemas taper waits. Enough. She puts the kettle on the hook, and the pot rings true the way it always does. And that sound is a kind of church. Candlemas comes. Candles are blessed, one for the beam. The plough comes into the nave, like a visiting relative who knows everyone's names. Henry stands at the door as people file out and says, God, give you good seasons. And for a moment, you see a lad who used to jump fires on midsummer, and a man who signs ledgers without flinching. And you think, may both of them keep their feet, and then, like a hand on the latch, the first smell of green again. The ox leans into leather, the coulter bites. The earth opens with that clean, thick breath. You walk behind with seed, the step-cast hope you could do blindfolded now, and you don't, because you want to see it. Your sister hums a psalm you've learned to like. Your mother lays a finger on the corn queen straw and nods as if both of them were doing their jobs. If your eyes are still open, let them soften on the ember under ash. Listen for the little noises that mean the world is keeping its promises. The beam's small creak settling. The pot's true ring when you set it down. The ox shifting like a slow thought turning. A bee walking in sleep. If your mind wants something to hold this. A chalk line straight enough to trust. A measure corrected because sunlight saw it. Rain that remembered you. And hands that will know what to do again when the bell says begin. Close your eyes. The field will wait. The year is patient with those who work at its pace. Spring tiptoes into work that asks more hands than strength. Lambs have found their legs. Now the sheep carry winter on their backs, like a promise you're ready to keep. Shearing day starts. With quiet, fleece takes calm. Edwin sharpens the long shears until they whisper against each other. The pen smells of lanolin and warm breath. You roll way gentle, knee against flank, hands sure at her jaw. She yields the way creatures do when they remember you from other kindnesses. The first stroke opens a lane of crimped white. Steam lifts in the morning chill like a soft thought. Your sister gathers fleeces as they come freer whole sheeps. Year in a single pelt, rolled neat, tied with a twist of last year's twine. Your mother picks burrs and thistles, humming a tune with no words. Father Thomas stands back where he won't startle anything and manages not to sermonize about wool turning into comfort, which is mercy. By noon, the flock looks suddenly smaller. All sharp angles and relieved faces. You smear pitch on a nicked ear quick as a blink, and let the away go. She shakes herself and rejoins the world, lighter by 5 pounds and unbothered by the arithmetic. The fleeces go to the loft, then to the wash, then to the combs, then to the wheel. The wheel will sing the afternoons away when rain takes the fields hostage. Spinning is winter's work, too, but spring thread has a brightness in it, maybe from the air, maybe from your sister's grin when the yarn holds even. The ditch you mended in frost asks for a different hand now. Rushes push up where they shouldn't. You pull them, thank them for lamplight they'll become later, and pile them to dry. The willow you pollarded sends up eager shoots. You cut a few forepegs and save the straightest for next year's hoops. In the kitchen plot, the soil is the color of bread crust. Your mother plants new slips of thyme and sage along the warm wall and says their names like people. She doesn't hide it anymore. Nobody asks her to. Henry rides the bounds and stops at the churchyard gate. He dismounts and walks, which makes people breathe easier. Lady Elenina has sent word to Father Thomas about a physic bed 3 by 9 paces against the south wall, herbs for the poor, under blessing and book. Not to replace prayer, the priest says mildly, but to give it hands. Your mother says nothing and brings cuttings. Yarrow goes in first, then Bethany, then comfrey, with the root wrapped like a sleeping child. A little board goes up. For healing, for all. The steward gives it a long look and says nothing, which is consent enough for a year that needs it. The muster clerk returns on a Sunday with a face like a shoe. He pins a parchment to the church door that says men must shoot 3 shafts after mass and keep strings dry and bows waxed. Father Thomas blesses the range again and says a word none of the boys will remember because the steward brings a fresh butt, and that is more interesting than theology. You draw and loose and miss less than you did. Your brother's arrow lands on the rag itself and stays there, quivering like a pleased thought. The clerk makes a mark. Saints, keep us, says the priest, and no one argues which ones. A dry week tries to teach beans humility. The well stays honest, but low. You carry water with the economy of someone who counts backs and not buckets. Your sister scratches tallies on the board by the door and makes small changes that end in larger mercies. A furrow turned early, a patch left to rest, seed held back from a risky corner. Your father listens the way a mill listens to water suspicious, then persuaded by the steadiness. He doesn't say she's right. He says, we'll do it that way, which is the same thing with less shine. Then rain handles itself properly. A soft day, a hard hour, a sky that empties and remembers to stop. The stream fills enough to turn the wheel full-throated. The mill sounds like agreement instead of argument. Walter measures fair, because the steward's man has taken a liking to dropping by unannounced. When the light is best for truth, Whitson arrives, smelling of grass and onion flowers. You eat outside because the weather tells you to. Wrestling stays. Friendly because the steward watches, and because everyone's backs have already learned their lesson from last year's hay. After Vespers, Father Thomas walks the green without his book, and talks bowstrings with your brother, as if he had always known he would one day. A rumor passes through like a travelling peddler. The king wants coin, or men, or both, for business, far away enough to be a story instead of a fact. The steward posts nothing new. Henry counts sacks and looks at the bridge, then looks at his hands, then asks for 4 days' labour on timber and promises ale that is the size it should be. The bridge gets a proper brace. When the next water comes fat down the lane, it lifts. It skirts and passes under like a lady with sense. Bees swarm on a day that feels made for it. The air goes thick with gold. Your mother catches the cluster on an apple limb with a tap and a whisper. News, she tells them, because you must. A birth at the far cottage, a death at the manor, a physic bed at the church, a blue ribbon that keeps finding itself tight. The next morning, the new skep wakes with a sound like a house deciding what to make for dinner. Honey will come later, clear as a thought you finally put words to. The road to town fills with pilgrims heading for a saint's day. You tucked 2 cheeses into a basket and a dozen eggs wrapped in straw, and walk with them long enough to collect a new hymn and a story about a fish that looked too much like a man to eat. At the market you trade for a small bundle of woad leaves and a pot with no wobble. Your mother buys salt from the woman with the knife-sharp voice and no patience for fools. Your sister stands with her back straight at a stall that buys thread and sells sums, and she leaves with a little coin and a big idea. Skeins sold regular, not all at once, when the fair shouts. A stream runs longer than a bucket, she says. Your father nods and says he'll cut pegs for a pegboard to hang the skeins on so the weeks can be seen. Thornfield changes its habits without saying so. The big door stays open a little longer on warm evenings. The kitchen sends a pot down to a widow who has given more than she ever had to spare. The steward scratches figures with more care and less flourish. Henry keeps his jaw clenched when he signs things, but looks up when children run on the green. Lady Elenina sits in the solar with 2 women and a basket of linen and listens, and then speaks, and then listens again. No proclamation, says Gentler, but you can feel it in the way the reeve pauses before he makes a decision, and in the way Walter nods at the measure. June fattens on itself. Butter is yellow enough to make you smile at the bucket. The hayfield is a lake of green that will be gold next week. You wet the scythe. The blade's wake lays a neat river behind your steps. Haymaking fills every rib of the day. Cut, cure, turn, stack, cart, laugh, swear, sleep. The sun does its long, kind best. A scythe sings. A lark agrees. That first night you fall into straw that smells like clean bread, and you sleep so hard you wake already halfway through a grin. On a noon so bright, the chalk lines on your sister's board glow. Father Thomas brings you the smallest book you've ever seen, for leaves sewn with gut, pages rubbed smooth. For numbers, he says to your sister, for recipes that save time, not souls. Your mother wipes her hands and sits awkward as a queen on a too-low stool and watches her daughter write beans, rye, eggs in marks that hold the shape of the day. The priest looks at the physic bed by the wall and at the book in your sister's hands and at your mother's face. God made herbs, he says, and minds. Best to use both. Storms will come. They always do. One rises black as old iron. 2 valleys over, shouldering toward you with a sound like barrels turned in a cellar. You hawk the nearly dry hay into cocks, humped like monks at prayer. You throw tarpaulins over the most precious. You whistle the dog into the byre. You lay a hand on the new bridge as if it were a friend you're proud of. The rain hits in chords, then sheets, then a temperate insistence that means to be thorough. The cocks hold, the bridge holds, the roof holds. After, you put the hay out. Again, to drink sun and exhale rain. Work doubles. Nobody complains. Everybody does. Then a day arrives that is so exactly itself, the year seems to have been aiming at it. Clear, warm, a breeze, just nosy enough to fetch the heat out of your collar. Bees thread clover. Swallows stitch the air. you cut the last row. The meadow is a clean plate. In the evening, the village eats outside, because why wouldn't you? And the talk loops slow, which patch first for reaping? Will Saint Swithin be reasonable? How many geese have already proved themselves fools? There is a new story about the old healer that isn't sad anymore. How a packet found a door. How a physic bed got blessed. How knowledge learnt to wear a new coat and pass the steward's eye. Without apologizing, by the time the barley turns from promise to surety, your tools are ready, and so are you. The sickles hang with their mouths shut. The reaping song sits at the back of your throat like something you can taste. The bell will tell you when. Bells always do. For tonight, lay your palms flat on the blanket and feel what the year has woven under your hands. Wool to yarn, yarn to cloth, herbs to steam, steam to breath, chalk to tally, tally to enough. The ember under ash says here. The horn pane holds the last thin blue that isn't quite gone. Somewhere the bees settle. Somewhere the ox shifts. Somewhere your sister closes the little book with a careful thumb and places it on the beam. Beside the Candlemas candle and the corn queen's straw. You are here, the roof holds. The pot rings true. Sleep. A dry week tries to teach beans humility. The well stays honest, but low. You carry water with the economy of someone who counts backs and not buckets. Your sister scratches tallies on the board by the door and makes small changes that end in larger mercies, a furrow turned early, a patch left to rest, seed held back from a risky corner. Your father listens the way a mill listens to water suspicious, then persuaded by the steadiness. He doesn't say she's right. He says, we'll do it that way, which is the same thing with less shine. Then rain handles itself properly, a soft day, a hard hour, a sky that empties and remembers to stop. The stream fills enough to turn the wheel full-throated. The mill sounds like agreement instead of argument. Walter measures fair because the steward's man has taken a liking to dropping by unannounced. When the light is best for truth, Whitsun arrives, smelling of grass and onion flowers. You eat outside because the weather tells you to. Wrestling stays. Friendly because the steward watches and because everyone's backs have already learned their lesson from last year's hay. After Vespers, Father Thomas walks the green without his book and talks bowstrings with your brother as if he had always known he would one day. A rumor passes through like a traveling peddler. The king wants coin, or men, or both, for business. Far away enough to be a story instead of a fact. The steward posts nothing new. Henry counts sacks and looks at the bridge, then looks at his hands, then asks for 4 days' labor on timber and promises ale that is the size it should be. The bridge gets a proper brace. When the next water comes fat down the lane, it lifts. It skirts and passes under like a lady with sense. Bees swarm on a day that feels made for it. The air goes thick with gold. Your mother catches the cluster on an apple limb with a tap and a whisper. News, she tells them, because you must. A birth at the far cottage, a death at the manor, a physic bed at the church, a blue ribbon that keeps finding itself tight. The next morning, the new skep wakes with a sound like a house deciding what to make for dinner. Honey will come later, clear as a thought you finally put words to. The road to town fills with pilgrims heading for a saint's day. You tuck 2 cheeses into a basket and a dozen eggs wrapped in straw and walk with them long enough to collect a new hymn and a story about a fish that looked too much like a man to eat. At the market, you trade for a small bundle of woad leaves and a pot with no wobble. Your mother buys salt from the woman with the knife-sharp voice and no patience for fools. Your sister stands with her back straight at a stall that buys thread and sells sums, and she leaves with a little coin and a big idea. Skeins sold regular, not all at once when the fair shouts. A stream runs longer than a bucket, she says. Your father nods and says he'll cut pegs for a pegboard to hang the skeins on so the weeks can be seen. Thornfield changes its habits without saying so. The big door stays open a little longer on warm evenings. The kitchen sends a pot down to a widow who was given more than she ever had to spare. The steward scratches figures with more care and less flourish. Henry keeps his jaw clenched when he signs things, but looks up when children run on the green. Lady Elenina sits in the solar with 2 women and a basket of linen, and listens, and then speaks, and then listens again. No proclamation, says Gentler, but you can feel it in the way the reeve pauses before he makes a decision, and in the way Walter nods, but the measured June fattens on itself. Butter is yellow enough to make you smile at the bucket. The hayfield is a lake of green that will be gold next week. You wet the scythe. The blade's wake lays a neat river behind your steps. Haymaking fills every rib of the day. Cut, cure, turn, stack, cart, laugh, swear, sleep. The sun does its long kind. Best a scythe sings, a lark agrees. That first night you fall into straw that smells like clean bread, and you sleep so hard you wake already halfway through a grin. On a noon so bright, the chalk lines on your sister's board glow. Father Thomas brings you the smallest book you've ever seen, for leaves sewn with gut, pages rubbed smooth. For numbers, he says to your sister. For recipes that save time, not souls. Your mother wipes her hands and sits awkward as a queen on a too low stool and watches her daughter. Write beans, rye, eggs in marks that hold the shape of the day. The priest looks at the physic bed by the wall and at the book in your sister's hands and at your mother's face. God made herbs, he says, and minds. Best to use both. Storms will come. They always do. One rises black as old iron. 2 valleys over, shouldering toward you with a sound like barrels turned in a cellar. You hawk the nearly dry hay into cocks, humped like monks at prayer. You throw tarpaulins over the most precious. You whistle the dog into the byre. You lay a hand on the new bridge, as if it were a friend you're proud of. The rain hits in chords, then sheets, then a temperate insistence that means to be thorough. The cocks hold, the bridge holds, the roof holds. After, you put the hay out. Again to drink sun and exhale rain. Work doubles. Nobody complains. Everybody does. Then a day arrives that is so exactly itself, the year seems to have been aiming at it. Clear. Warm, a breeze. Just nosy enough to fetch the heat out of your collar. Bees thread clover. Swallows stitch the air. You cut the last row. The meadow is a clean plate. In the evening, the village eats outside, because why wouldn't you? And the talk loops slow, which patch first for reaping. Will St. Swithin be reasonable? How many geese have already proved themselves fools? There is a new story about the old healer that isn't sad anymore. How a packet found a door. How a physic bed got blessed. How knowledge learnt to wear a new coat and pass the steward's eye without apologizing. By the time the barley turns from promise to surety, your tools are ready, and so are you. The sickles hang with their mouths shut. The reaping song sits at the back of your throat like something you can taste. The bell will tell you when. Bells always do, for tonight. Lay your palms flat on the blanket and feel what the year has woven under your hands. Wool to yarn, yarn to cloth, herbs to steam, steam to breath, chalk to tally, tally to enough. The ember under ash says here. The horn pane holds the last thin blue that isn't quite gone. Somewhere the bees settle. Somewhere the ox shifts. Somewhere your sister closes the little book with a careful thumb and places it on the beam beside the Candlemas candle and the Corn Queen's straw. You are here. The roof holds. The pot rings true. Sleep. The bell calls you to barley as if it had a mouth. Do beads the stalks. Your sickle sits in your palm like a word you've said all your life. Left foot, cut, gather, lay. The field answers in neat whispers. Your mother binds sheaves with the twist that never loosens. Your brother stacks stooks 6 and 6, so they drink the sun and shed surprise rain. Children set fallen heads into small bundles and call them treasure. Someone starts the tune that pulls the day along, slow and sure as a cart on level ground. Bread tastes like it belongs here, thick heel, onion, a pinch of salt if you're lucky. Small ale rinses the dust from your throat and puts your shoulders back where they go. Father Thomas passes with a mug and 2 words of blessing, short enough not to tangle anyone's rhythm. Even the reeve works, because eyes are on him, and because barley insists on making even careful men honest for a few hours. Every 10th sheaf stands straight in a tithe row, counted aloud so there's no arguing later. The steward rides by once at noon, and once when the shadow of the hedge has stretched to your knee. He ticks what he ticks. Henry rides by only once, dismounts, sets a stook to rights with both hands, and says no words to make it a speech. People see it anyway. Accidents come like flies quick, annoying, sometimes mean. A girl's finger opens on a sickle tooth. Your mother lifts her hand and brings yarrow from the edge of the field, chews, presses, wraps with linen that's seen. Worse, tell the plant what you need, she says, not whispering now, not hiding. Father Thomas sees it, nods once, moves on. A boy steps in a rabbit hole and comes up cursing to learn his ankle still works. The curse turns into laughter because the reeve is too far off to hear. Gleaners move like careful. Birds in your waycold, Sarah, Agnes the young, with a babe on her hip. 2 boys from the poor end of the lane. Law and custom say they have the right. The year, kind, this time, agrees. Your sister keeps a rough chalk tally of what's left for them, and what rain might ask for if it comes sudden. Enough, she says, 3 times that week, and her number is the right shape. By late day the field smells warm and sweet as ovens. Stooks stand in orderly small villages. You turn once to see the whole green hedges framing gold, a path cut tidy down the headland, the cart ruts shining. The kind of view that sits quiet under your ribs and makes work feel like belonging. Next day, rye. The day after, the stubborn patch in the north lot that never ripens as quickly as it promises. Then oats that pour through your fingers like a friendly hourglass. The cartwheels complain and are greased. The pins knock home with the sound every cart makes in every year since carts were invented. Walter at the mill peers down the lane and counts sacks before they arrive. A habit he doesn't know people see. Ricks rise behind the cottage's good honest stacks. Batch tucked against weather with a fork. Sides faced like bread you're proud of. At the manor, the big rick grows on staddle stones, rat-proofed the way money prefers. Your father stands back, squints, and nods at the angle. Will stand, he says, as if his word could be a brace. In this case, it almost is. On a hot afternoon, with air like a held breath, Someone's pipe ash kisses stubble and thinks about becoming more. You see it the same moment Edwin does. Before alarm can be a word, shirts are slapping, boots are stomping. A line forms from the ditch with wet caps and hurried buckets. A narrow scorch, a puff of sulky smoke, and then nothing. Crisis decided by the side that had more hands. The steward rides up late and says, "Well done," with a face that doesn't know how to do that yet. Everyone is polite and goes back to work. When the first grain reaches the mill, the tail race laughs. Walter measures fare theirs, a look on him that says he feels watched even when no one is there. Your sister stands with her chalk again and does the trick of turning measure into a picture people can't argue with. The steward's man glances, shrugs, and is satisfied, which is a small, quiet win no one sings about and everyone uses later. Feast. Days cross the harvest like ribbons. The Assumption brings cool inside the church and beeswax that smells like honey someone kept a secret. After Mass, you crack a hard-boiled egg in the shade and share it with your youngest, who decides the yellow. Tastes like the sun and will not be corrected. On the green, the players perform a saint's miracle with 2 boards, a borrowed curtain, and a devil whose tail still betrays him. The steward laughs by accident. People like him more for it. When the last stand in the last field goes down, the old man who has always cut the final handful does it again. Slow for the sake of the moment, quick for the sake of his back. He hands the sheaf to your mother. She ties a kern baby from the best heads, neater than last year, sets it on the beam above the hearth, next to the Candlemas taper and the little book. "Mind the mice," she says again. The house hears. Harvest. Home is not a shout so much as a letting out of breath. The cart is dressed with bows. The children sing a line they only half remember. The ale is sound because Agnes brewed with a good hand this month. Bread comes hot, cheese comes generous. A goose appears on a board for the manor table and a smaller bird for yours. Father Thomas says thank you in a dozen words and then sits and eats. Like a man who believes what he just said. 2 nights you sleep in the field beside the ricks, just in case. The stars feel closer because the air is clear and because you're tired enough to believe it. A fox takes the long way around when it sees you, insulted by your existence. You wake once to a nightjar's churring and once to your own hand patting. The ground like you could reassure the earth. It reassures you instead. After, threshing returns flails in the barn, song without taking turns. Dust that settles on your eyelashes and makes the world soft at the edges. Winnowing on a day with a sensible wind. Toss, fall. A quick golden rain, the chaff lifting like a little ghost that means no harm. Sacks line up interesting as soldiers each a story, each a winter you can answer when it asks the hard questions. Geese waddle toward their argument with destiny. Rents are paid in coin and bird and grain. Henry sits at the far end of the hall and does the thing his father did differently. He signs Henricus with a hand that has steadied this season. The steward shuts the ledger with that snap that belongs. In every year, done. People walk out lighter by a weight paid honestly. Your sister asks to keep the tally board till Candlemas, and Henry says yes before the steward thinks to shake his head. She chalks a plan you can see now. Skeins sold regular eggs set aside for market days that sneak up. 1 sack of oats to lend and have returned in kindness when someone else's year stumbles. Your father frowns a minute like a man testing a handle, then hangs. Pegs, he whittled, so the skeins can look like a river instead of a flood. Your mother smiles without looking up because the bread is ready to come out, and the bread, this time, will feed the extra mouth that good planning always brings. News from town is louder than it is clear. The king wants ships, or men, or money, turned into both. A tax gets mentioned. A clerk with a seal rides through and counts things that are not his and writes them down as if the ink made them so. Father Thomas reads the notice out loud, leaving out the parts that only frighten and keeping the parts that require actual action. Pray and practice, he says at the end, which manages to cover most of life. Autumn happens at the edges, before it claims the middle. Spiders string bright ideas from hedge to hedge. The ash lets go first, because ash is practical. Smoke decides it prefers mornings. You pull the last of the beans, hang them dry, and thank the vines that gave more than they promised on the day. The rain came right. Apples thump the loft floor. The sour ones become cider that will argue its case by Christmas. There's a day that just feels like the year sighing, cool in the wood, warm on your back, a breeze busy enough to make the ricks hum. You stand in the doorway at dusk and listen to small sounds that mean you did what needed doing. A mouse reconsidering the new thatch and going elsewhere. The cow shifting and resettling. Your sister's careful closing of the little book. The soft tack of your mother's palm on the loaf's crust to judge if it will sing when you cut it. Winter will come with its old tasks big. Rushlights, flail, wheel. But that is a story you know how to tell. For now, the barns are a promise you can point to. The measure at the mill behaves because sunlight and chalk taught it manners. The physic bed at the church throws a last few flowers and will sleep under. Straw with the rest of you. The kern baby watches the room like a small, polite queen. Henry is learning. The reeve remembers to ask once before he takes. Walter weighs fair when he forgets to be clever. The fox keeps to the hedge. If your eyes are still open, let them sit on the ember under ash. Lay your hand on the blanket and feel the woven proof of months. Cut to sheaf, sheaf to stook, stook to rick, rick to sack. Loss avoided by quick feet. A finger mended by a plant you can name. A ledger shut with less dread than last year. Somewhere the barn timbers talk to the night and the night replies. Somewhere the bell will, in its time, say begin again. Not now, now the roof holds. The pot rings true. The seed for next spring waits in its jar like a secret you will tell when it's time. You are here. Sleep. All Hallows brings candles and names. Father Thomas reads the parish roll, twice, once for those gone this year, once for those who left so long ago the new children think of them as story folk. You stand in the dim with beeswax warming the air and feel your own name sitting, patient with all the living. After Mass, Sowler's little ones with brave faces carry baskets and sing the short song they know. You press a soul cake into each palm, marked with a cross from your thumb. Frost finds the lane, the ash lets go, neat and quick. The oak takes its time, like a man finishing a sentence he enjoys. You pull beets, lift turnips, lay carrots in a trench, with straw like a bed for sleepers who awake in February with no complaints. Apples go down into the cool with a prayer against thieves, both the two-legged sort and the mice with honest appetites. Martinmas comes sharp enough to make you grateful for work. The pig gives itself the way pigs do completely. There is nothing in a pig that does not become food, soap, thread, glue, or a story for later. The yard is busy and clean buckets ready, brine made, pegs set high. Your mother salts with the calm of someone who knows winter's questions and prefers to answer them in advance. Black pudding is tied, bacon hung, lard strained into jars that will turn parsnips useful in the dark, bristles saved for brushes. The little ones learn to stay out from underfoot by being underfoot once and earning a sharp word and a sweet afterward. Spinning takes the afternoons. The wheel hums, the thread holds. Your sister counts out skeins by the pegboard your father made and chalks the week's small sails on her board to 2 Agnes their young, 1 to Edwin's eldest, 1 saved for market because coin does what barter cannot, buy salt when no one has any to trade. In the corner, the loom is dressed for a narrow clother, colour of undyed wool and weather. Your mother throws the shuttle with a rhythm that warms the room more than the fire can manage. Thornfield modifies itself without saying so. Henry holds court in the hall in a cloak that sits differently from his father's, less swagger, more weight. He finds Walter for a measure accidentally shaved. He praises him the next week when the scoop comes up true. He listens to Edwin's complaint before the reeve speaks, which teaches the reeve a new way to stand. Lady Elenina organizes candles for the church, with wax scraped from old ends and promises of new. The physic bed against the south wall still throws a brave daisy and a late sprig of thyme. Under straw, St. Nicholas. Day brings an apple with a clove stuck in it and a nut placed in your youngest sleeping hand because Father Thomas says, the saint travelled farther than sense and children should know about generosity that walks. Your sister writes the little ones letters for the first time and makes them say their own names aloud, like blessings. Advent tightens the hours. Work is the same work, but quieter at the edges. You fix what will not survive a thaw. The hinge that complained since Lammas, the thatch by the beam that flirted with rain, the cart pin that wanted to be a legend. The ditch you cleaned in July dreams under a skin of ice and remembers how to be useful. The cow's breath makes a cloud in the byre. You rub her neck where she asks. Advent tightens the hours. Work is the same work, but quieter at the edges. You fix what will not survive a thaw. The hinge that complained since Lamest, the thatch by the beam that flirted with rain, the cart pin that wanted to be a legend. The ditch you cleaned in July dreams under a skin of ice and remembers how to be useful. The cow's breath makes a cloud in the byre. You rub her neck where she asks. Yule arrives early in the week. So does a cold that means it. Henry gifts her small fir log to each cottage thin, as charity but still charity. Yours burns with a pleasant stubbornness. You wassail the orchard with mugs and song, tapping each trunk with a stick as if to encourage it toward opinion. Cider warms your mouth and your reasoning. You shout into the dark, and the dark does not shout back because it is full of stars, and swallows the noise for its own. At the manor, they roast a boar's head and sing Latin with a tune that makes your chest lift even if the words don't. At your table, the best of the pig comes in, the best of the bread, a cheese you hid behind the empty rye sack against this very night. Father Thomas speaks 12 words worth hearing and sits down. No one scolds him for brevity. On St. Stephen's Day, the mummers find their costumes rag coats, a paper crown, a wooden sword with a history longer than its handle. They perform the old fight and the old rising. The doctor cures death with a bottle labelled best and a hop. Even the steward laughs. Coins clink into a cap. The players bow with exaggerated dignity and then fall on the ale like men who have earned it. 12th night lets misrule in through the latch. A bean in a bun makes Agnes thy young queen for an hour. She decrees all cups refilled until the jug is sensible again. And then she decrees that no one may speak ill of anyone until Candlemas, which is bolder work than it sounds. You sleep that night as if someone had given you permission. Snow comes and goes. The flail takes the mornings, the wheel the afternoons, the little book the evenings. Your sister keeps a new column, debts owed to you and by you, which looks like vanity until the week the miller's niece falls ill and someone needs 2 loaves you can spare because the tally says so. Your mother opens the packet under the beam, smaller now, and measures what is left against what is needed. Enough, she says, not hopeful, not fearful, accurate, in a wind that tries every crack in the wall. The door lifts, and Father Thomas steps in with a small wooden box and a face that hides a smile badly. Inside, a quill, a tiny horn of ink, and a square of scraped parchment. From the abbas, he says, for the keeping of receipts and the writing of recipes that won't fit into memory. Your sister touches the quill like it might sing. Your mother touches the parchment like it might burn. Your father says, use it for what the steward can't argue with. And everyone understands which column that is. On a night when the stars scrape the roof with cold, you hear dogs speak in low, angry voices. Wolves take a chance at the sheepfold. Before fear can be a word, torches are lit. Men are shouting their names so no one swings blind. The dog from the far end of the lane finds a courage bigger than himself and becomes a noise with teeth. The wolves decide better stories lie elsewhere. In the morning, you find prints like black flowers in the snow and one away with a ripped ear, who forgives the world by chewing. You thank the dog with a bone and something better, a hand under the rough where gratitude lives. Plough Monday follows Epiphany like a boy after an older brother. The plough comes into the church again, garlanded with a ribbon someone saved from summer. Coins collected pay for ale and a new share when the old one gives up the ghost. The men who pull the rope through the village sing loud enough to wake. The ground, your father runs a palm along the beam like you might smooth a child's hair. The ox tosses his head in the yard as if he knows his part is coming back. Candlemas, candles, blessed. One taken home, set on the beam beside the kern baby. And a little book. The physic bed sleeps under straw, but smells faintly alive if you bend close. Father Thomas says winter is half over, which is also how long it feels it has left to go. The thaw comes in the lane and the ditch first, then in the field's mines, then so simply it feels like forgetting you smell green. The coulter bites. The plough opens the first truth of the year. Step, cast, hope. Your sister hums, a psalm that sits tidy with the work. Your mother turns the kern baby toward the door as if it should watch what it made possible. Henry rides past and raises 2 fingers in a greeting that is almost a blessing. The steward writes something down that does not make your stomach jump. The bees shift in their sleep, as if remembering a dream with flowers in it. Night again. The ember under ash says what it always says. The pot rings true when you set it down. The little book closes with a careful thumb. Somewhere an owl asks and is answered. If your eyes are still open, rest them on the beam candle, straw queen. Book in the chalk by the door, on the peg of skeins that looks like a river pretending to be still. You are here, the roof holds. The seed waits in its jar, the way letters wait in a hand. When the bell says begin, you will for now sleep. Lent leans over the village like a kindly hand that still expects you to mind yourself. You eat thinopy, pottage, onions, the last apples that behave, fish from a hawker with a cart that smells of both river and salt. Father Thomas speaks of small abstentions and large mercies. Your mother saves fat in its jar anyway, because spring is long and virtue won't warm a child by itself. Lambing comes in a rush, then in a trickle, then not at all, and then again just when you've put the ropes away. Nights break into pockets of work, a lantern hooked on a nail, steam around a ewe's nose, your father's hands knowing when to pull and when to wait. Your sister warms stones at the hearth and wraps them in cloth to slip against slick bellies. The first breaths arrive like wet hiccups and then like song. You mark the wobbly new with soot on the forehead left for use. Right for Tupso, the tally board will tell the same truth in daylight. Hedges need laying before birds claim them. You bend hazel like a bow, slice part way through, heel it over. Stake and pleach until the line becomes a fence that grows stronger for being cut. The ditch you opened in frost runs clear and smug with the first honest rain. You grin at it like a friend who owed you money and paid on a market Thursday. A royal purveyor rides in with 2 sour-faced men and a parchment big enough to be important. Ships, coin, men, he says all 3 and waits to see which word makes the most noise. The steward's neck goes stiff. Henry listens without nodding. When the man says grain for the king at a fair price, Walter looks at his feet. Your sister steps forward with the quill from the abbess, the little horn of ink and the square of scraped parchment. We will need receipts, she says, voice steady enough to sit on. The purveyor blinks, then remembers that receipts are trouble. Later, if you don't make them now. He writes, he takes less than he meant. He returns the pen as if it were a small, polite knife. Henry signs Henricus beneath, large enough to be legible from a horse's back. The steward watches numbers turn into promises and swallows them, the way men swallow bread that doesn't belong to them. Palm Sunday comes with willow, not palm, because England is practical. Children flap branches like friendly birds. Women lay them on the threshold to ask for gentler weather. In the physic bed against the south wall, time wakes under straw. Yarrow pushes up its hands. Bettany decides to live again. Your mother pinches, tips, and names them out loud. No one pretends not to hear. A fever rings the far end of the Lanquick red, mean, with a bone ache that makes men quiet. The physic bed becomes a kitchen. Your mother hangs a cloth to keep steam where it can. Be useful. Willow bark goes to cups, honey to spoons, mint to breath. Father Thomas brings holy water and a chair and the kind of presence that makes rooms behave. The packet under the beam opens thinner than before, still enough. After 7 days, the fever forgets itself in your cottage, and then in 2 more. At the 3rd house it stays, and a woman sits on her threshold and learns how grief will always be older than her. You carry broth and not advice. The bell tolls once, and then the world collects itself. Easter morning is a sharp blue that smells like broom smoke and church stone. You dye eggs in onion skins and hang a bit of cloth with Wode's first week blue. It stains your fingers like a promise it will keep better in summer. Bread rises the way it should. Father Thomas sings the big words, Latin wide as a field. Your sister mouths along and gets half right and all forgiven. Rogation comes, the beating of the bounds, with willow switches and psalms. Children learn where parish ends and someone else begins. Men touch stones like altars. A girl drops her switch into a ditch and the reeve, of all people, fishes it out and gives it back with a wink that makes him seem temporarily human. Henry walks, hat off, boots muddy, saying nothing and tabulating everything. When you stop at the bridge, he lays a hand on the new brace and says, "A good thing." The steward does not disagree because everyone is present to hear him if he did. Bees swarm on a warm noon that finds every doorway open. The air turns to amber lace. Your mother knocks the cluster into a spare skep with the apple bough and the old rhyme, then leans close. "News," she tells them, "as you must. Lambs come. Safe, a fever gone. A man in a blue coat who wrote more than he took. Herbs waking in a bed that belongs to everyone, a candle waiting its season." The bees settle like a household returning from a long day. The muster clerk is back on Trinity Sunday, with spare strings and the kind of smile men wear when they've learned to clap on the offbeat. 3 shafts after Mass, bows kept strung. At home on feast days, strings waxed, no excuses. Your brother's arrow kisses the rag and stays. Yours thuds into the butt with less apology than last time. Father Thomas blesses the field and then argues cheerfully with the clerk about whether Saint Sebastian preferred longbow or crossbow. It ends in laughter because the steward is there and fairness is catching this year. Flax stands shoulder high. You pull, not cut fruits, and Orlan set it to dry where wind can talk to it. Retting will come, and breaking, scutching, hackling, the wheel, the loom. For now, bundles look like tall sleeping cats against the churchyard wall. Your mother pats them as she passes, a habit that embarrasses no one anymore. One afternoon, a cart overturns on the lane bend where carts have always fancied a lie-down. The Lord's man trapped beneath makes a noise a man shouldn't have to make. Before anyone can turn panic into a plan, half the village is there with poles and pry bars, wedges and scents. Edwin calls the count. Henry drops to the wheel rut, like he means to wrestle the axle by himself. The steward sets stones where they'll act like brains. Lift, hold, pull. The man comes free with a leg that won't forget this season. Your mother is already there with poppy and willow and cloth. Father Thomas with oil and prayer. Your sister with a little book to write what must be repaid. Later, the steward posts a figure wood for a brace on that corner. Fewer carts will nap there now. June fattens. Butter yellows. The hayfield learns the song you sing with a scythe. Early, you and yours go out with stones for waiting and a jug for a green. The blade's wake lays a river in the grass. Rakes follow, spread, turn, gather. Cocks rise like small huts with excellent manners, where the mind's itself a soft day. A hard hour, a wind that knows its job. Once, a storm shoulders over the hill with a barrel sound. Tarps go on, curses go up, saints are invoked, and the rain tries and fails to make trouble. The next morning the meadow smells like someone baked a loaf the size of England. There is mischief, because years don't come pure. A fox tests the henhouse when a hinge forgets its work. Your brother finds the hinge's memory with a new peg and a stone. Walter tries an old measure and meets your sister's chalk again. The kind that turns truth into a shape you can't argue with. The reeve starts an inspection on a day too close to market and finds Henry arriving early with his hat off and a very public interest in how fees are collected. The inspection becomes a conversation. The conversation becomes a rule everyone says they already knew. Midsummer is green to the point of laughter. Boys jump the fire and pretend not to look if girls are watching. Girls pretend not to watch and do it better. Nettles get harvested with gloves and turned to soup that tastes braver than it is. The physic bed throws flowers that draw bees and old women who like to pinch things and remember. News reaches you bent around a saint's day. The king has what he thinks he needs for a month. Taxes keep their knees under your table like unwelcome cousins. But the receipt sits in the chest Henry's name under the purveyor's hand, and the steward's sums match what left the sacks. It feels like standing under a roof that doesn't leak for the first time since winter, by the time St. Swithin's guessing has passed. Oats fog at their tips, barley nods, rye holds firm. Your hands know what comes. Your feet can find the step before the bell says it. The sickles hang, mouths shut, like dogs that understand the whistle. The wheel hums in the afternoons. The bees work until even they admit the light is going. And then, one evening, simple as someone putting a hand on a latch, the village rests at the edge of another plenty. You sit on the threshold with your back against the jamb and watch the lane think about dusk. From the byre, a cow shifting on good straw. From the loft, apples turning sweetness into something sharper. From the beam, the Candlemas candle waiting. The kern baby watching, the little books strap-looped, neat. On the board by the door, chalk says more than you could yesterday. On the elder by the hedge, a white rag flutters once and then holds still. If your eyes are still open, let them soften on the ember under ash. Lay your palm flat on the blanket and feel how the year has woven itself. Lamb to fleece, fleece to thread, thread to cloth. Willow to switch, switch to boundary. Fear to steam, steam to breath. Somewhere a bee walks in sleep. Somewhere Henry signs a thing without grinding his teeth. Somewhere your sister closes the book and sets the quill on the horn and smiles with her whole face because a column added the same way twice. You are here, the roof holds, the pot rings true. When the bell calls the barley, you'll rise. For now, sleep.